Hello, 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 and we're back with another episode of the free Bant Express with me, Daniel O'Keefe. I'm here today with a really cool guest. He's an astrophysicist, and he got his degree out of Trinity. His name is James McNamara, and he's a really good friend of my colleague in college, Dave, who lives with me in the gaff. And he was telling me about his friend, who's like super smart and really interested in talking about really in deep shit, which is something I'd love to do as well. So I have him here today. James, say hello.
Hello.
I'm going to put this closer to you because my voice is stupid fucking loud. And, so we're going to talk about loads of different stuff. First thing I actually want to get into, James, very specifically, only because I just googled in science today, and I'd like an explanation from someone who can probably explain it better. They found yesterday, well, it was published yesterday, that they found a binary star system, but the binary star is one star that's fucking spinning ridiculously fast, and its counter binary is not a star, it's a black hole.
Okay.
And it's called a BE binary system, binary star. And from what I understand, the only reason why the black hole hasn't sucked the star in is the star is spinning at such an insane fucking velocity that it's like a spinning top. The two of them are countering themselves out, and its accretion, it's spinning so fast, it's got its own accretion disk, which is basically kind of, it's really cool because I know black holes have their own accretion disk, and it's kind of being sucked out a bit from the star, which is also having its own accretion as well, but they kind of have matched together, and there's like an extra wave of accretion when they both smash together, and they're just kind of staying in their own thing. My question is, how the fuck is that even possible? Does that even make sense that the star is spinning that fast, the black hole doesn't suck it in?
Well, if the star is spinning that fast, you're talking about, what would it be? It'd be to do with like the conservation of angular momentum. The fact that when something spins like that, it's trying to spin out and fly away, and there'd be a balance between it being sucked in by the gravitation of the black hole. And when you said it's spinning, is it the star itself that's spinning?
Oh, it's revolution.
Yeah. So it'd be trying to spin out and fly away.
Okay.
But it's balanced, and that the speed that it's going out that way, away from the black hole, is balanced by the force of it being pulled in.
Okay, so yeah, what then? Would that mean that that star, that binary thing, has like a very short fucking lifespan?
Well, that I wouldn't know. Like that, I'd have to look at the whole. Look it up and look at the whole system, and you'd have to analyze it mathematically and set up a model to see how it's going to evolve over time. That eventually it could spin in and drag it like that. That's what I would imagine from what you said would be the ultimate end state of the system, is that it would eventually be pulled in. But I don't know. Maybe it'd eventually fly off and loop off and it'd separate.
Because my only assumption for why it would have a short lifespan is, I know the star, like anything, the harder and faster you burn, the shorter you live.
Yeah.
And I know with the binary systems as well, they tend to not live as long as a normal standalone star.
Yeah. Well, it depends on the nature of the systems itself, like that.
Oh, really?
This is interesting now that this is a similar thing that I actually did for my final year project,
and
that of the evolution of binary star systems. So, how to put it now? The system that I studied was it was a particular type of supernova called a type 1A supernova. In that you'd have two stars in the system, and they'd be of different sizes. So there'd be a larger one and a smaller one. And as you said, the larger it is, the faster it goes through its life. Like the most massive stars, they burn through and then supernova and explode within millions of years, tens of millions of years, where the likes of our sun, which is much smaller, lasts for billions and billions. So the particular one that I studied now, you had a large one and a small one. So the smaller one was burning much slower, and the two of them are revolving around each other. And the large one, as I said, goes through its life cycle much faster, and would end up turning into a rather than a black hole, it'd turn into a white dwarf.
Yeah.
And that's spinning around the other larger star, and then the smaller star then goes through its life cycle at a slower rate and would turn into a red giant. And as it grows and grows and its radius increases and gets much, much larger, the white dwarf starts to accrete.
So it starts feeding off it?
Yeah. Starts feeding off it.
Okay.
And then the mass of the white dwarf will increase and increase. And I don't know if you what you know about white dwarfs, but essentially there's a limit to the size of them where the white dwarf
collapses in itself.
Well, it's being held up by a thing called electron degeneracy, which is to do with the.
Is that to do with the oh god, the fucking thing that is released by like every star and it flows through every single thing, every human being all the time, and they're in like they're almost tiny particles that a specific word for them that it's to do with their force of being pushed out can balance the star from collapsing.
Yeah. Electrons and atoms.
Yeah.
Like when you say that it's in everything, we're literally just talking about atoms. Like, the phone that we're recording this on is made up of atoms.
Yeah.
Star is made up of atoms. Like, the thing, we're made of stardust.
Yeah.
That the stars are mainly hydrogen, which is the simplest form of atom. And then when a star supernovas and explodes, it creates all the larger elements. So the fact that we're made of carbon is just a more complicated, essentially just a more complicated version of hydrogen.
The only way you can get things like platinum and gold is when a star goes supernova, because it's the only time you can get so much intense heat and pressure in the small amount of time in one fucking go.
Yeah, and now I could spend ages to do a lecture on this of why you end up with iron and why iron is the limit of what the star can generate.
Yeah, it dies once it starts to burn iron. That's the end of its fucking...
Yeah, and that's to do with the attractive and repulsive forces between the nucleons, the protons and neutrons that are in the atom, and anything larger than iron, like you've got like uranium and all these things. They are only created when the star explodes, and the iron. Iron, all the different iron things, iron atoms and the other elements in it fuse together and create the larger, more complicated elements.
And that's the basis for how we have that stuff in the ground, is when we were molten most stars must have exploded, and either the stars themselves or they got onto bits of other planetary debris that smashed into the Earth when it was molten, and that's where we have the minerals underneath, or the elements underneath.
They would have all been pre-existing in the protoplanetary disk that you'd call it. The
so they already would have been there.
The disk of dust and gas. Yeah. They would have been all in there. Like this, what you're talking about is nucleosynthesis, where these larger elements are created. But they were created and would have been existing in the protoplanetary disk. The smashing of I think it's called Theia. Is the name of this planet that got destroyed when Earth was created. Nucleosynthesis doesn't happen on those levels of collisions. You need the massively extreme conditions of exploding stars to create these larger elements. It would have
been a rock planet for the most part, wouldn't it? Theon would have been a rock planet for the most part, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Well, I might at that early stage they would have been big molten. It would have been about the size of Mars, they think it was. And then it crashed into the Earth, and the pre-Earth, whatever was existing there, smashed together, and then that created
the moon and the Earth.
It created a disk of dust around the newly created Earth, which then would have accreted together and formed the moon.
That's fucking savage.
Yeah, and then we can tell that by looking at the elemental composition of lunar dust, and we find that it's not rich in things like iron and nickel, which were much heavier. So when the Earth was in a molten state, like with any fluid, you have the heavier elements would fall to the middle, and that's where we've got an iron nickel core at the Earth, and then things like oxygen and carbon and silicon are lighter, and they would have reached the top. So then when we look at the moon and analyze its elemental composition, we find that it doesn't have these heavy elements. So it was created by the things that were blown off of the edge. The middle of the Earth wasn't nearly as affected at all by the collision.
That's what I remember. Like, it's a really, really nice visual piece, but they use it over and over and over again in most shows to explain it. But it is cool to have. It's like the Earth's the way it is, and a small thing kind of cascades off the side and cracks into it. And then it separates it, and then into loads of little particles which accrete into.
What's amazing about it is you could write about it and explain it, but the graphics and everything that they can do now that we can recreate and pretty much see what it was like. You know, they're artists' interpretations, but they're pretty damn close.
They're mind blowing.
Yeah.
I remember when we sing about the elements. I remember I was listening to. I always assumed as much from watching the Universe, but I watched a particular episode of How the Universe Works with Brian Cox, and he basically fundamentally goes through the elements of the periodic table and how like a star is all of these, and then when it blows up it creates all of these, and that's basically all the elements, and it's like you're the stuff of stars, literally. It's really cool, like, and it's as well when he explains why our sun burns a yellow blue kind of light, the yellow kind of light, and that every single element burns a different fucking colour. So for the most part, so that's how you can tell different gas giants are filled with different kinds of things.
Oh yeah, you look at it. It's called spectroscopic analysis, where you're looking at the light coming out, and that's to do with like this. I don't know if that people listen how aware they are of atoms, but atoms, you have a tiny little nucleus in the middle, and then they're virtually nothing. Like we sitting here, we are more than 99% empty space. If you got the entirety of humanity, every person on Earth, and here, I better explain what the structure of atoms first. You've got a tiny nucleus in the middle, and then I'll say the model. This is called the Bohr model. You have an electron flying around. Like I'll stay away from quantum mechanics and probability densities and all of this.
We're going into quantum mechanics, man. We are going there. So.
But for this now, you can essentially describe the atom conceptually as this tiny nucleus in the middle with electrons flying around it, and they're almost completely empty space. Now, if you took that and then take the electron and either push it in the middle or take it away, and just take the amount of how much stuff is in an atom and how much stuff are we made of. If you took the entire human race and squished them down so that empty space between the nucleus and the electrons were to disappear, the whole human race would be about the size of a sugar cube.
I know that we are literally empty space, but I've never heard it described. In that kind of a. This is how fundamentally irrelevant.
That's how you get it across. That by finding some kind of like that. I don't even know. I didn't even know if you'd call that an analogy, because that is the case. But you find a real world example of how to describe it. Imagine everyone on the Earth, squish them down, and it'd be the size of a sugar cube.
It's fucking crazy shit. It's so weird, like, when you learn stuff like that, and then you learn the other side of, like, biology and stuff, where it's like, we think we're this one person, but we could be easily a conscious representation of loads of symbiotic ecosystems within our body, and their reactions, their pulls, their retractions and everything like that, and their laws and their natural things they do. We've imagined or hypothesized a conscience for all those of individual signals, which we have as the voices in our head and the ego, the id, and all that kind of shit.
Well, for me, that's getting more into philosophy and mysticism, and how do we interpret what science is telling us. And for me, anyway, you have to be very careful when you're doing that kind of stuff. Like, you know, I think essentially what you said there, I think Bill Hicks has a line on it, where he goes on about the guy, he talks about the news story of the kid that does, imagine a good drug story, and some kid does LSD and realise that we are all one consciousness subjectively experiencing itself.
Yeah.
Like,
it's very...
that's mind-blowing, and wow, that's amazing. But you're people need to be careful when they do that kind of stuff.
I was going along the more sense of when you learn that, when you know that, and then you also know about, you know, humans are basically atoms that are basically space. And then you also know that realistically we're all made of the exact same fucking elements, and we're not really that unique for the most part. We're all like everything from a fucking lighter to a star to a person to a shoe. We're all made of the same fucking shit, just less or more.
But what do you say? Like, you know, when we get into that, what is empty space? Like, if we get into the quantum mechanical, like that particular model that I was on about would be the Bohr model, where it's like it's called the orbital model, where you just imagine the nucleus and the electron, the nucleus in the middle, and then the electron is like a tiny billiard ball flying around it, and it's a mathematical construct that's able to explain. What we're on about there with spectroscopy. It's how they developed it in the first place. It explains why hydrogen has the certain characteristics. The light from hydrogen has the characteristics it does. But when you try and analyze more complex atomic systems, the Bohr model fails.
Yeah.
So we take that's not what an atom is. That's only a way to describe it at an initial level, and then we're going to when you move up to the next level then of that, the quantum mechanical description, where the electron becomes
we're fucking
a probability cloud.
Yes.
That
our standard laws of physics kind of lose.
Instead of a thing spinning around, the electron is everywhere. Like Schrödinger, who came up with the Schrödinger equation for
the cat theory.
Yeah, the Schrödinger's cat is what he's famous for. But in physics, what he's more famous for is the Schrödinger equation, which explain and gives us useful information of how to explain how atoms work. He thought of it in terms of the electron being smeared out in space, and it's in all these places at once. But when you read about from when they discovered quantum mechanics in the early 20th century, the physicists they didn't know how to interpret what kind of results were coming out. So you have all these different interpretations, and then when was it in the 30s, I think they settled on what they called the Copenhagen interpretation, which was thought up by Niels Bohr, the guy who came up with the Bohr model.
Yeah.
And when the Copenhagen interpretation essentially boils down to shut up and calculate. Don't think about this too much. We're going to see how useful it is.
That's realistically, when you think about it, for anyone who hasn't, for anyone out there who wouldn't actually necessarily see it, if you ever watch an episode of, this is like bad examples for someone who's an actual astrophysicist, but if you ever seen something like The Big Bang Theory, and you see Sheldon and he's doing stuff on a board, and it's just all these symbols and signs and stuff that make no fucking sense. That's essentially what you're working with. And the idea of what people learn in school of the atom and the molecule and all this stuff, that's not what you see, and that's not what you deal with at all. And you're only, it's a visual representation to get across what this equation means.
The Big Bang Theory is amazing, frankly, because they that stuff that Sheldon is doing is actual proper stuff. I can remember I did.
Really? So when you look at the board, you can actually go, I fucking know that.
When I was in my last year, I did an exam in high energy physics, where you're dealing with quarks and all these kind of things, and making up the nucleus. And I went in and did the exam on it, and I called over to a friend's house, and he was watching The Big Bang Theory, and I wasn't really paying that much attention. I didn't really find it that funny or anything. But I looked at the board, and I said, "Hey, that's the board. What's written there?" I just did that in my exam.
That's fucking cool.
Like they get
the fucking writers.
They put they really do put the effort into it.
That's all that stuff when you try and grasp it, and you don't look at it as just this is an equation, and for the chemistry part, it's this, or biology, it's this. When you look at it at the grand scale, the only thing that can get in your head is the constant reminder of how fucking pointlessly irrelevant we are in the grand scheme of things. And we're only really as relevant. We're only relevant to ourselves and the people we communicate with. Well, that is what defines our relevance.
We'll get to that by the end. That's what I want to say to get out of this podcast. My view on this, the point of life, the universe, and everything. I think it does have a point. I think that we can tell now. So
I think it's like not pointless in the sense, but pointless in the way that some of the times as a species we've grown on and on about these ideals, these fundamentals, these things we should do to better the planet, and and stupid things like the conversations of, well, we better have a super gun just in case somebody else gets a normal gun, and all this stupid stuff, and it's like, what are you doing? Well, honestly, what are you doing?
That, again, going back to that when we developed quantum theory, and you have all these physicists like Bohr and Schrödinger and Heisenberg, another big character in it. I find it fascinating reading through their debates and arguments. These going, what does this stuff mean? We've just found that we've discovered. I don't know whether that's even the right word for it, but we've developed this theory, but we don't really know what it means. And how they were arguing with it is fascinating, everything. But I was talking to a friend of mine about this kind of thing, and he said, like in 100 or 200 years' time, when we look back at these debates of them talking about what are the implications of quantum theory, he said they're going to look back at it in the same way that we look back at when you look at early Christianity and during the medieval period, when they're arguing about the nature of Christ and God and the three people in one and all this.
And you're like, what are you doing?
Yeah, why like this? But they're trying to. They're just talking and arguing essentially, but they do need to get on with it. Like quantum mechanics works, frankly. arguing over whether it's true or not. It's a useful description, like this, like. And I would have talked about this even when I was in secondary school with actually a guy who was a Jehovah's Witness.
No way! Interesting conversation.
Yeah. So we'd mix that science and religion together, and I'd say about quantum mechanics and the implications of this and uncertainty and everything, and he would turn around and be like, "What's the point of it? What's the point of these things?" And at the time, I couldn't answer it. I found them fascinating, but I didn't realize how useful it was. But literally, the modern world would not exist without the development of quantum theory. Like again, the phone we're recording this on, the television on there. Computers, transistors, they are all designed by exploiting the properties of quantum mechanical systems. When you've got a transistor, the most basic thing in a computer, where you've got electrons jumping from one material to the other, it takes advantage of the fact that you've things like quantum tunneling and all these things. And you couldn't make modern transistors now. An engineer couldn't make modern transistors without someone having understood and used quantum mechanics to understand that
So
this
the
could
base
be done
maths,
theoretically. Yeah.
That's fucking that's I love that the whole thing of quantum mechanics. Like I found out only recently, not recently enough. I keep saying recently, but it could have been a year or two ago. That when it first came on the scene, people started talking about it, and then I researched it and paid a little bit of attention to it. And like I said, it's been around for fucking years. Like fucking years. And we're only just now, people are accepting that it might be around. And when you think about the fact of how long it takes for the majority of the people to agree that something actually exists. And like...
What exists exactly?
Well, not exists, but the idea of the mathematics behind quantum mechanics and stuff, right?
Yeah. For it to dilute down, like people use analogies now, like a person's gravity and all these things.
Yeah.
We're using terms that
convolute the term.
That Newton and all these people, and even before that, of things being attracting and attracting and repelling each other. But that's just because the language that Newton came up with to describe these systems in a certain way. Like, and I'm putting it on Newton, but there's plenty of other people involved.
Oh no, I meant more in the sense that it didn't take so long for the different types of people and religions and all the kind of things to agree when a new idea is thought of or understood. If it didn't take so long for the whole planet to conform to the idea of it, the technology or ability to increase in our society and technology and biology, whatever. Would be so much faster.
Yeah.
It just seems to have to go through a really long, as you said, trickle-down process before the majority of the planet goes, okay, we'll invest in learning about it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like it's defeatist. It's a silly attitude considering the same people who are iffy about trying something new are usually funding other people to look for something new in the first place.
Yeah.
It's often the thing that they funded.
Yeah.
Like that, which can convolute.
Yeah, and we can get into that, but the idea of that you have to fund things and something useful has to come out of it rather than doing the research. Like even now, I was investigating whether or not to do a PhD in astrophysics and kind of continue what I did in my project. And the guy who was talking in my old lecture, he had said that. He said, "Oh, what you do? You apply for the grant and everything, and say you want to go and study these globular clusters and measure the distances and analyze supernova and everything." But the reason you're getting the funding is because you're creating cameras, like brand new, super high powerful cameras with amazing resolution. What's creating the camera is the drive to understand these things. But the only reason you get the funding is because we're going to get a camera so we can put it in a better cameras and phones afterwards.
Basically.
Yeah, like now, like all the cameras we have now, CCD cameras. I don't know if you know the term. CCD cameras. They're the fact that we have cameras everywhere now. All these miniature cameras, and again, it exploits quantum properties of the systems. But they were invented by astronomers and astrophysicists that wanted to image the sky better. Yeah. So they created these things, and then like that, the technology dilutes within the entire system, and then we get. Like this, the camera that's in your phone, or any camera at all now. Everything has the high definition pictures and everything we're able to take now. They're a direct result of people trying to measure distance from stars.
And like the likes of I don't think people understand the technological breakthrough behind something like Hubble. And
Oh, yeah.
what it can capture, the things it can do, has made our ability for military shit and hospital shit and fun cameras and all that kind of stuff, just from that alone, to be able to say we have a thing that can actually take photographs in all the different spectrums of light.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
And the idea, and just getting something like that up into the
space.
sky. Yeah. And the technology, like you can watch documentaries of the construction of.
I watched the Hubble documentary with Leonardo DiCaprio narrating.
I haven't seen. I don't think I've seen that particular one now, but I've seen ones on it. But the construction of the mirror. And in the whole story, the fact that the mirror was dodgy, like the first pictures that came down, they were all blurry, and then they had to the telescope had to be abandoned, like it was useless. But they planned a mission and went up and essentially gave him a pair of glasses to fix him being short-sighted.
That's fucking cool. There's so much, like, in regards to what we're finding out, the things we understand now. We've got more, we think we're finding more answers to why we're here, blah, blah. Personally, I think that the grand scale of things, the universe in itself, nature, everything seems to work at a really, really slow pace. It likes to, bit by bit, just make sure everything is perfect before it goes to the next thing.
Well, you see, I wouldn't use that kind of language to describe it when you're saying it does these things. You're personifying, like this. You could do the same with like with a guitar when you talk about it's talking or something, that you're personifying, or even doing it with animals. You attribute human characteristics. Anthropomorphization. You're applying human characteristics to things that aren't humans. And I really don't like doing that.
I don't consider the universe human, or I don't consider that there's a
but even do that when you're saying it does, and it likes to wait. Like what does it mean it likes to wait? You just understand that these processes that we understand, they just take a long time. That I don't like. I really don't like using that kind of language to describe it.
That's very true.
Because again, when you were on about that, when we were talking about the language of quantum mechanics and the analogies of it spreading into the society in general, that's what it's the use of language and the evolution of language over time, how words, how their meanings change and how people use them, and all these things. That's an incredibly slow part. But we're even getting to the stage now. I read a paper about where you're able to analyze documents over history and look at these. Look, we can actually analyze now the rate of cultural change, how words change over time, and whether language. Etymology, studying the history of words and the evolution of their meaning.
It's like no, you're right. I did phrase myself incorrectly, and I should phrase myself better. For the most, just for posterity reasons, if anything, like. But no, so what you're saying about find the meaning of stuff like that of life or whatever. I personally think we've only fucking scratched the surface in our ability to actually start researching and really understanding the little things that's there. And I think at the moment, as Alan Feynman quote, if you think you understand quantum mechanics, you don't understand quantum mechanics.
I'll just add to that, like that people say that all the time, and that's one of those. But another quote of his that is one of my life philosophies. He said that if you can't explain something to a 10-year-old,
that's right,
you don't understand it yourself.
The
only way you can know that you understand something is that if you're able to take something like quantum electrodynamics or quantum chromodynamics and be able to, through the use of the particular language you're using, the pictures you're using and examples, explain it to someone who is completely disconnected from it.
Yeah.
And get across how important this is.
And it's one of those things that I think we won't get to the stage of being able to actually go, oh, I think we actually know why we're here, until, as you said, years and years ago, we'd look back at people talking about the gods and like that and go, what are you doing? This is a silly conversation. That billions of years later we go, I can't believe these guys didn't know what they were looking at when they were looking at it, you know what I mean? And I think even when or if we do understand that, I think that would be the encryption key to unlocking what the fuck, or if there is a reason, or whatever the fuck for the universe and everything else.
Yeah. I know. I think this part of the human condition is that we have to decide why we're here, take everything we know, and then come to a conclusion to decide what is the purpose to life. We take as much information as we can, and we decide and try and come to an agreement. And that's the difficulty. Like when we get into,
do you think it's just the human condition that we cannot seem to concept rhyme without a reason?
Well, yeah. We are pattern finding machines. We have to find patterns in everything, and that comes from, early man. What was called like this early Homo sapiens, and even I don't even know about the Neanderthals and all this. But in order to survive, you had to see patterns. You couldn't see everything as being completely disconnected. Individual things happen. You had to make connections. But that's if that's pushed too far, it's essentially reading too much into things.
Tunnel vision kind of thing.
Yeah. You become convinced, and you talk to people who are massive into mystical traditions and tarot cards and all of these, and a lot of people, especially.
God, I'm gonna go into tarot cards.
No, like that. People, especially that who would be considered to have a scientific mind, they'd be very, very dismissive of it. But that's someone like that trying to apply meaning to their life and trying to see connections between things. Frankly, it's this. I would have been I wouldn't have been angry at it, but been very puzzled and confused and having an aversion to that kind of stuff because I was like, I don't know if I'll actually be able to understand it.
It feels like they're making connections rather than finding connections.
And by taking it on board, that might mess up what I already know. But from what I found, it is absolutely pointless. It doesn't get anyone anywhere to start criticizing them, or even making fun of them for understanding, because you need to decide where you want to direct your anger. And frankly, it's for me it's the economists.
Yeah.
Like this. When you talk about the philosophy of economic thought, it is the most.
Look, the basic idea, the basic way I found, as I said, to explain to a small child, is how we know we're in a system that doesn't make sense. Is the two fundamental things we need as a species before human thought gets into it is education, because you educate yourself even as an earlier species, as you said, you find patterns and you know how to survive and how to do things to make your life easier and less taxing. And the other thing, which is health and life and to continue growing and stop diseases and all that shit. They're the least funded things on the planet in regards to most economic structure.
Oh yeah.
They're the first things money gets taken out of. And that alone is a perfect example of a fucking bollocks up system.
Yeah.
It's like, it's the whole thing of, well, it's not going to affect me, and I'll be retired in 10, 20 years with a fuckload of money. Why should I care?
Well, for me, the main problem I found at this, and basically when the whole financial crisis happened and everything, like people were losing their heads and the shit hit the fan and things went crazy, I said, I should probably try and figure out exactly what's going on here, at least to the best of my ability. So I sat down and try to understand economics and figure out what was going on. Why do they do all these things? Like looking at their mathematical models, like the models that created these derivatives and all these things, and you can say, oh, that was wrong, and they put the wrong assumptions in. But that is their biggest problem, is your mathematical model and your theories are only as good as the assumptions that you make and you put in. If you put crap in, you're going to get crap out the other end. And I went looking at what kind of models they were creating, and I was looking at them and went, these are just like Newton's laws that they're using. And when you look about the history of thought, that is what happened. Newton created these laws that were able to explain the motions of systems and how energy is transferred from one body to the other. And the early political economists in the 1700s and the 1800s, they came along and essentially just took Newton's laws and changed the variables and says, we're going to put humans in here instead of these atoms and billiard ball and planets and things moving around. But in order to make the creation, they just changed the variables, and I was sitting there thinking, you can't just do that. I mean, I know why you're doing it, and you get useful information out, but
to a certain extent.
Yeah, but do you realise the the implications
On
of
the
how,
long
and
term,
then you
like.
pushing and calling these like immutable economic laws, like even applying the word law to these things and making an equivalence between Newton's mathematics and then the mathematics of economics.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
It's
and
nonsense.
it's there. It's the problem with it is this: they make certain fundamental assumptions about human nature in order to make the equations work. The fact that we're self-seeking individuals that try to, like, they use words like this, maximizing your own utility and the usefulness you get out of something.
Some of the phrases they fucking use as well.
Oh yeah, yeah.
What's the best one, which I think is the funniest one, which actually finding out this now that's how they apply most of their laws based on physics. This actual law that they have goes against physics in itself, which is exponential growth.
Oh yeah.
Nothing has exponential growth. Everything is under entropy, the law of entropy, and that's it.
But it just means things can't keep expanding and getting and increasing forever.
It doesn't work.
That once you get like this, like infinity is a mathematical concept, a very useful mathematical concept. But there's a general rule in physics that once if you're working with your equations and an infinity pops out, something somewhere has gone wrong because infinity isn't real.
Yeah.
There is no real infinity. But the economists, like, what is the answer now? You've got all the politicians and economists saying, how do we get out of this mess? Oh, we need to grow the economy. And keep growing. But can we keep on growing? What's going to happen in 20 years' time? And they're just going to say, oh, we just need to keep growing. You see, that's what we've done all the way up to now. And what's got us to where we are now is economic growth. So to get us further on, we need more economic growth, and just keep going. But this, if someone ever says to you, economic growth, we need it. Say, what is economic growth?
Yeah.
What do you mean? What is growing? Economic growth is a particular type of growth, but what's growing? The thing you're measuring. Well, what are you measuring? Well, we're measuring the economy. So the economy needs to get bigger. Well, an economy is just an abstract term for the relations and exchanges between people, taking the thing as a whole.
Yeah. It's not economy isn't a thing you can hold in your hands and go, this is an economy.
Yeah.
And it's also like, it makes when you hear things like, you hear the news report and it's like, after the budget was done today, we didn't reach the economic growth we were looking for. It's smaller than last year, so we have to cut schools and we have to cut health safety and hospitals and stuff. And you're like, okay, first of all, every business would fail if they did that.
Yeah.
Economic growth, the fact that you said we didn't reach the same growth as last year, we still made a surplus.
Yeah.
We still earned more than we paid.
Yeah. But we're not growing
A
fast enough.
standard business doing well breaks even.
Yeah.
And majority of the times when you see big businesses, you don't realise that they actually are breaking even. And the only reason they can afford losses is because they have stocks and other shit that they can take from it. They got money saved in the bank. Like Nintendo, for example, are making a fucking huge loss at the moment and a massive loss in their new console. And their initial projection was they were going to sell 9 million consoles by the end of 2014 or summer 2014. Now it's dropped to 2 million. And their initial understanding was they'd have a surplus of like about 5 billion at the end. Now it's a deficit of 20 billion. But they're okay because they have rainy day funds for shit like this.
Yeah. Well, probably not even rainy day funds. They probably just borrow the money based on their credibility. As Nintendo has been fine for the last while, so they're good for the money. Like when you're dealing with things like companies, treat them like people. It's a name you put on something.
Yeah.
And what is the credibility of this company is the same when you're going to a bank and you're dealing with a person. What is the likelihood of this person paying me back? But for some reason, these big companies and corporations just seem to have a lot more credibility than things like governments.
That's because they very smartly are aware that governments spend their money on stupid things frivolously.
Yeah.
But like, you hear that, you're like, oh, our economic growth is shorter than last year. Then you look into it like, we still made like a couple of billion this year. And yet the decision after that, oh, we didn't make 25 billion, we only made 19 billion. We have to cut hospitals and schools.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Where did you get from A to B?
Yeah.
How did you do that?
Yeah.
I want to know. Because it's fucking nonsense.
But we're getting here now like this, making fun of and laughing at it, say this is ridiculous. But frankly, that doesn't that doesn't solve the problem. It's just going
It
around
doesn't,
calling economists idiots for what they're doing. I think they are personally, but
Yeah.
I don't gain anything by accusing.
No, but it's
accusing
nice
this
to
thing.
vent.
But say what exactly are you doing this thing? When we said that the economy is just an abstract concept, the way the economists use it, what is it exactly? So well, all you're doing is taking stuff and moving it around. The fact that when you set up trade,
Yeah.
you're taking resources and moving them around, and as well as that, changing the nature thing through like the industrial process, and just like, you know, going from an ore to a metal and then into a phone.
Even the exchange of currency.
Yeah, well, we'll leave currency aside like that. Money really complicates things.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, but
That's a silly idea.
yeah, but so an economy is just moving stuff around and changing the nature, like of an individual thing. What you're doing is reducing the entropy of a thing, which is its disorder. Something like iron ore could be said to have a very high entropy because it's in a disordered state and it's mixed up and it's got lots of impurities. And by putting that through the metallurgical process of refining something from an ore to a metal, you've put loads of energy into it and reduced its entropy.
Yeah.
Made it less complicated. You've got a simpler thing like this. Something with the lowest entropy would be like a crystal, some perfect a crystal or a diamond or something
Yeah.
would have incredibly low entropy because it's just pure carbon arranged in a certain way. And if you put like impurities into that, you're making it more disordered. But the key thing of what's going on is that energy. We get energy and use that to move things around and to change things to create the world we live in, which is the economy, right? So that means that puts a fundamental limit of what we're going when they talk about things like economic growth.
If the way you said energy, that actually to me that rang really clear because an understanding of what you're trying to say. Energy can only be transformed; it can't be created or destroyed.
Laws of thermodynamics, yeah.
And so that makes perfect, like the stuff that we're trading, everything. Yeah, it's also that's always going to be there.
Yeah.
You're not making more or less of it. You're just transforming it into something else.
Yeah.
But it's all staying in the same fucking place all the time. Like.
Yeah. So that puts it. We're saying, okay, where do we get our energy from? And when you look back like this, if you draw a chart of the amount of energy use and everything, you see the population growth charts, and it occurs in the climate change thing, the hockey thing, where it's a very low level. Like when you look at the Earth's population over the last 1,000 years, it's tiny, and then when the Industrial Revolution happens, it just goes through the roof. But the problem with economists is that they put that down to human ingenuity, and we figured these things out, and we're able to exploit stuff like coal and fossil fuels. But to them, the key thing is human ingenuity that went in, and it's an incredibly important aspect. But it's not the key. The key is the amount of energy that became available when we started to exploit coal and oil and all these things. It just gave us loads of energy to basically do whatever we want, and we went crazy. We fought all these wars, like the First and Second World War would have been impossible. You look at the amount of how the world economy transformed from a coal economy to an oil economy through the catharsis almost of the First World War.
Yeah.
Like when the British started out, they literally only had I think it was a couple of hundred, maybe even only a couple of dozen oil-based transport vehicles. Like this, when the war started, it was a horse war. The horse was the energy that powered the war at the start.
Yeah.
But then by the end of it, they were thousands and thousands and thousands of lorries and trucks and things because they were able to better further the war effort.
Yeah.
And then in the aftermath of the war, and then like would people turn around then and say, "Oh, war is a good thing," because it forces technological development. But you really shouldn't. Can we not think of a better way to do it than war? We should be able to grow up.
It's like when someone's argument I had a while ago, a couple of years ago when I was younger, about how war is fucking pointless, and they were saying, "Oh yeah, well think about all the fucking medicines, all the hospital stuff. One of the reasons why we're so good with operations like that is because Hitler got people to practice on cadavers and all that stuff." And I was like, yes, I understand that that's what happened, but I don't see how at any point we couldn't have got to that stage by going, I have an idea, let's learn more.
Yeah, and even maybe we couldn't have back then when you had the First and Second World Wars. But that does not imply that that's what we have to do now.
Yeah.
Like, we're in a problem. How do we get out of this economic recession? Oh, let's have a war. And that'll solve our problems. It's like, no, I think we should probably find a better way to do this. But again, going to back to that of the hockey graph and the amount of energy available in society, as I said, that for the economist sees that hockey graph and just says, oh, it can just keep going up and up and up and up and up and up, and it doesn't have to stop. We can just continually grow. But when you put it in terms of the amount of energy available to us, the fundamental limit becomes how much oil is there in the world. And there is a limit. Like when we talk about the renewable and non-renewable resource, there is a set amount of oil. Yeah. We have this amount, like to put it in business things, you have a set amount of capital, and you need to use it. You're going to run. You have to use that to make sure you're able to get more back, or you're going to run out and you're going to use up that capital. It's not coming back.
Yeah.
And we have gotten to this kind of state we're in now of the absolute miracles of the modern world. Like this, I talked to a friend in Australia on Skype where he's sitting in a fucking a GPS directed tractor driving around fields, and I'm sitting at home, like, you know, in the middle of the west of Ireland, talking to him on a laptop and just going.
It's mind blowing, like.
Yeah, like this. I don't know if you ever heard it's a, I don't know what you'd call it, a maxim or something, or just a saying that any sufficiently advanced technology from an individual's perspective is indistinguishable from magic.
Yeah.
And that may as well have been magic. And I can remember as a kid sitting down like this. I don't know about that. I don't know exactly how the modern flat screen televisions and everything work, but the old cathode ray things. And I was looking at it, and I think, if I don't figure out how this thing works, it may as well just be a magic picture box that makes sounds. So I better go out and figure out what's a cathode ray tube, what's an electron that does this, that causes the fluorescence to go on, to create this thing that I'm seeing.
Those TVs work.
I'd have a general idea, but I'd be
LEDs.
Huh?
LEDs.
Oh yeah, but there's other kinds of, you know, the plasma TVs.
Yeah. Oh well.
And all these. Yeah.
The plasma TVs were the first, and they were the shittest by far. A friend of mine got a plasma TV, and my bulb TV was better resolution than the plasma TV. Then there was a liquid crystalline display where they used the conductivity of liquid to complete a solid charge and make it a lot better. And it also wouldn't. One of the big problems with TVs is the bulbs heat up and shit like that, and that reduced all that. Then when they found when they discovered LEDs, and they were like, oh, we only need the current running through them. It technically doesn't really need anything else, and it's fine. And they knew that they can change by adding the current slightly higher, slightly lower. They could change the light that's put out by it.
Yeah, that's just the central principle of an LED.
Thousands and thousands of LEDs.
Yeah. Like if I said I didn't know how they work, the only reason is because I haven't applied and sat down and tried to figure out.
But you made a point about magic. Like I was listening to Joe Rogan. I don't know if you know him.
I know of him. Yeah, I haven't actually gone around to listen to his stuff yet.
He was a Fear Factor fucking guy, but he's stand-up comedian for years, and I didn't know this. And he's a UFC commentator as well. But he has a stand-up comedian piece, and he's talking about science and how it's basically indiscernible from magic in a certain extent.
From someone who doesn't understand it at all.
He was like, look at me, I'm a comedian. I've been a comedian for 20 years, and I've been talking into this mic, what we call a mic. I know is I talk into it, it runs down a cable, my voice gets louder.
Yeah.
I mean, you can sit there and you can go through and explain how the wire, and it changes it to vibration, and it goes down the wire, and then it comes out and replicates the vibration and it gets amplified through magnetics and everything like that. Still, to me, that might as well be fucking magic anyway, you know? And it's like, it's the whole thing of like, even just because we can find the understanding of something, doesn't mean it's not mind-blowing.
Oh, yeah. And like that, and like this, people come along and say, "Oh, like I wouldn't have the time to figure out like this. I've got a wife and kids and a job, and need to do all these things." But when you and this is the importance of education. These kind of things should be. I think they should be explained better. Like when you describe the microphone, like for me, the principle involved is exactly the same principle of what's going on when you have a guitar, an electric guitar, where you're taking the vibration of something and changing,
magnetizing.
But once you have this kind of systematic understanding, you take that and you apply it. Oh, they're just doing the same thing, just applying it in a different way and producing a different item.
Yeah.
And once you have that and appreciate it, frankly to me it's like art appreciation. You define the same thing when you're looking at a piece of medieval art. You need to understand how it got there from the time. What were the views of the people at that time? Why did they create what they created? What did it express to them? We mightn't be able to feel or understand exactly what it meant to them, but when they wrote things, they described how it was, and we can take how they describe things and apply it to now. Like this, how we understand how guitars and things work.
It's you're right. It's unbelievably fundamentally important that we learn that shit when we're young, because, like you said there, once you know, you don't have to actually know the entire mechanics of the world. You just need to understand the basic principles, and once you do, then you can, as you said, you can apply it to other things. Once I found out how we see, then I now understand cameras. You know?
It's
like it's light being put into your eye, and then it hits all the different cones and everything, and then it goes into your brain, and your brain interprets all those signals and then relays it back to you as an actual image. And there is a delay, and I love the fact of when you think about that. When I started learning about that, then I understood the difference between time perception and how time is not this one constant thing that we all revolve around. Time is represented only to the person themselves, in the sense that when you speak to someone and when you see someone, you're actually seeing them in the future. Or you're seeing them in the past, because even though to you there's no difference, there is an actual increment of time between your eyes receiving the light and then your brain telling you this is the picture, and then your brain explaining what the picture is for you to understand it.
This is something now I don't really want to get into it, because frankly I've been thinking about it an awful lot recently and still haven't come to any kind of conclusion, and frankly I don't think I will. I've kind of given up on it a bit, thinking about it too much. About that, the nature of time and whether time exists, because like this, you have to start bringing in general relativity. And when you say time and you're talking about time difference, well, Einstein's relativity tells us that time as a separate entity to space is a distinction that we only make because of our nature as humans, and the fact that once you get up to extreme conditions of very high speeds and high energies, or at the early universe, that space, the distinction between space and time, like when you're talking about the curvature and everything, it breaks down, and they're two aspects of the same thing. And that's, again, like this, you're getting into the quantum mechanical debates and everything. Or
it's explained very nicely and plainly in like fantasy movies when they have like a god or something like that, and it's like, how long have you been around? Time is of no meaning to me. And it's like, when you think about it, if a planet had a consciousness, is time really meaningful to them?
Well, for me, that's the biggest thing. Like when they're talking about the problems in physics, and we've got quantum theory that explains things at a tiny level, and relativity that explains the universe at the large scale level, and the fundamental incompatibility between the two of them. Like that is the problem of physics. But why is that a problem? To me, it's that we don't understand time.
Yeah, we still call it the space-time continuum.
And the nature of this, and the difference between how we experience it and what it is outside of our experience. I don't know, but frankly, that's the kind of thing when we're on about the purpose. That's the kind of thing we should try and find out, because it's fascinating.
Yeah, it's like there's
instead of trying to grow the economy and grow and grow and grow and grow.
Oh, it's probably like, how dare I use this quote? But in Thor, he explains to what's her name again, Natalie Portman's character. He's like, and on Earth you have a thing called science. We have a thing, or some people call it science, some people call it magic. We come up from a planet where it's one and the same. And it's literally like, whether it's magic or it's science, it's your interpretation to pick the word. It's how you view your involvement in it and your understanding and how you choose to learn it. That kind of only separates whether it's magic or science.
Well, it's just the words we apply to it. When you mentioned earlier on about etymology and the meaning of words, and they're changing over time. Like this science, what is science, and what does it actually mean? What does the word mean? It just means knowledge.
Yeah.
And things they will say, what's knowledge? Again, you just get down to this philosophical debate of going round and round, and we just go, look, science is useful. Magic is fascinating and enjoyable, and all these things, especially like when you get into tarot cards and all that, like that's magical thinking and all of that.
I don't think that's magic. I think that's more not superstition. I think that's more
that's superstition and magic. Yeah, spiritual. But we're just, frankly, I think you're just applying different words to the same thing, and people enjoy. But it's the same thing as anyone reading works of literature. They're just getting lost in something enjoyable.
That's a good point. Is it fair to say that faith and science, or the endeavor into science and the endeavor into a faith, are essentially the same thing?
I'd say they're both a quest for knowledge and a quest for truth, of just whether or not that's.
And for the most part, although you might do individual practices of really learning a scripture and to where that came from, or really understanding a particular law of physics or anything like that, your general day to day when you're not sitting down thinking is literally just whatever helps you to understand to get by.
Yeah.
For the most part, you're never really going to know the answers. So you like the stories and the general hypotheses and theories.
Yeah.
So they're kind of not identical, but they're very similar mindset. And I think if that's the case, it's really weird how there's such an affront between science versus religion.
Yeah. We just need to get over it. But get over it. Like this, I'd criticize both sides and just say, would you stop arguing about these? I'd have a bigger obviously coming from a scientific background, I do have a bigger issue with religion and specifically Christianity.
Well, yeah, because science can prove how water can turn to vapor, but it can't prove how a person can turn water into wine. So there's a bit more taxing. There's a bit more finite kind of tangible stuff.
But when that was written down at the story, they didn't know what water was and what wine was. What was the difference? Like when you look at ancient Greek philosophy and how they define all these things, like they would have just seen the two of them as different types of liquid. But they didn't understand water. Water is that we have water molecules, and you've got oxygen and hydrogen that are together going around, and then wine is it is mostly water, but there's extra stuff in it. These organic compounds and more complicated molecules and atomic structures. So turning water into wine, we can understand what the fermentation process was. Like when we're on about, when we were saying about any sufficiently advanced technology being indistinguishable from magic. For ancient people, the fermentation process was magic. Or like a god came down and you go through this ritual, and it produces this thing, this wine. The process changed it from it, and then that's how they try to get across the divinity of Jesus in terms of he did this without the fermentation process.
Part of the bets that back then he was just like a super scientist who had Bunsen burners and shit in his gaff.
Yeah. And then when you talk to theologians and theologically minded people that turn out, it's just a metaphor, you see.
Yeah.
It's just a metaphor. But I'm like, no. But most people don't think it's a metaphor. They think that is the literal truth. Like the whole thing of creationism in America now, especially.
It's actually
of the earth being 6,000 years old, that they genuinely believe it is.
There's a difference between having your faith and having your thing, and then being fucking blind, refusing to see what's actually been proven.
Yeah. But my big this again, it's like the tarot card. People who are into tarot cards, this making fun and ridiculing Americans in general for believing that it's pointless, and it doesn't get us anywhere. My issue is with the theologians at the top who, when you come along and challenge them, they go, it's just a metaphor. But you turn around, you're not telling these people it's a metaphor.
Yeah.
You have to take into account that this science or the scientific method has shown us that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. It doesn't fit in. Your model is ridiculous. And they say, and if you try and change that and say, that's just science's view of it, but religion's view of it is this, and you're like, no, because when you change that thing, you're talking about nuclear processes and half-life decay. How we measured this and got to this conclusion through the decay of uranium into lead. That's using quantum mechanical assumptions. So saying that that's wrong causes everything else to break down, which is.
Well, wasn't that the whole point of finding the Higgs boson? To go, turns out, thankfully, we're on the right track.
Oh yeah. The Higgs boson now is major, and I haven't been following enough of it, but it is hugely important in the fact that it is
Proof in the pudding, really.
Well, not the proof like this. It's not that it proves anything. It allows us to move to the next step.
Yeah, it basically says all the calculations you've made do actually hold water, in a sense. Or the process in which you are choosing to use.
Well, here, like, if we use an analogy of the scientific method being like rock climbing, of trying to move up, it's given us a foothold so that we're able to move up and see what's at the next level. And the reason is because they said that the Higgs boson is the particle that is responsible in the Higgs field of the universe that permeates the entire universe. This quantum, this unit of the Higgs field, is what is responsible for giving things like
mass. It's responsible for giving things mass. That's
what the neutrons and protons and the level of quarks and all these, what gives them mass. And if we can understand why particles have mass, we have Einstein's special relativity equation of E equals mc squared, that basically says that mass and energy are different types of the same thing that are related through this unit of the speed of light, and the fact that like the implication of something of the speed of light being constant. Like, I can just say that, but when you look at the mathematics of what's going on and how it relates to everything else on the larger scale, and why is light so important? I don't understand. Like, for example, now light anything with mass speed. If you take any particle with mass and start accelerating and speeding it up and making it go faster and faster and faster, for that object, it becomes less. It experiences time at a slower rate. Time slows down. Like this, again, Einstein used the things of speeding up, or we use the analogy to explain of someone in a spaceship. That time, someone's sitting there with a clock. Their clock, when they move really fast, their clock will move slower than someone who is relatively moving more slowly.
Yeah.
And you can accelerate up and up and up by putting more and more energy into this particle, and make it go faster and faster, and it experiences time slower. But it eventually, the speed that it gets to reaches a fundamental limit at the speed of light, which is about 299,000 meters per second.
It's infinite mass, is it called, isn't it?
Well, no. See, this is the thing now.
Not infinite
it
mass.
can't. The thing with mass can't reach the speed of light. You can go faster and faster. In order to get something with mass to the speed of light would require an infinite amount of energy to put in.
Yeah.
Because you need to keep putting more energy in to make it go faster and faster. But light travels at the speed of light, not any slower, not any faster, because it doesn't have mass.
Yeah. Apparently, protons do have mass, though, don't they?
Oh yeah.
And light
they are mass.
Light is photons and stuff like that. And
light, a photon. And again, going when we said about Einstein with energy and mass being interchangeable through this unit of the speed of light.
So the photons are mass, but
no, the photons would be energy and not mass.
Okay.
But again, we're getting in like what is energy and mass?
Yeah.
Well, Einstein says they're different forms of the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, frankly, you're getting down to word games. Like, let's come up with a new word to describe the stuff that Einstein's equation tells us is the same thing, as opposed to making the distinction. That you make the distinction to use it in the equation. But if you want to move up, let's come up with a word that encompasses both of them.
I can't think of a word. I'm gonna think of just meshing the words mass and energy, smenergy.
Yeah. It's literally like, and this. Okay, can we move on now? Move on now to the next level, and once we both understand what that word means and what it refers to, we can go on and talk about it on a larger level.
Does that theory hold? I keep saying hold water, but I can't think of another phrase for it. The whole idea of, in theory, if you were to get for example, a ship. In a sense, like, instead of the water or the wind being what's pushing it's pushed by the photons of the light.
Oh yeah. This is the space sails. Yeah.
Yeah, and the only way, that's the best way, or not the best way, but the most feasible way in a sense, if we could capture that energy to get to the speed of light. Because
we can capture it. It's actually the theoretical base of that, these solar sails, they're fine. It's just like it's a question of engineering. The physicists have figured out.
Oh, really?
The physicists have figured out. Yeah.
Sweet.
It's absolutely possible that the principle of capturing the solar wind to create momentum to pull us out like that to go to other planets in the solar system. Yeah, it's grand. So now we just give that to the engineers and say, see what you can come up with.
Oh, sweet. Because I only heard about that about 5-6 years ago. I heard about this, and I hadn't heard anything from it since. So that's actually really cool to hear something that was kind of in theory we don't know. To oh no, it actually works. We just don't have technology to build it.
Yeah.
That's fucking cool.
Yeah. Well, we probably even do the technology again. It goes into funding and things.
Funding and research.
So again, when we're looking at what do we do as a species, is that the best thing to do? Like now, I have a big massive bugbear with that. Do you know Elon Musk? He's this. He's one of the businessmen that is held up now. What did he come up with? I think he came up with PayPal. Actually, I think that's how he made billions and billions. And now he's inventing electric cars, and he had this project of some high-speed train system he was going to set up in America. But his latest thing now is this.
Is that using quantum stasis?
No, I think it was actually there's just high pressure air. But again, he comes up with these ideas, but then to put them into practice just failed. But his big thing now is this colonizing Mars. He's made his billions through PayPal.
Oh, that motherfucker!
And he's from a South African fella. Yeah. But do we really want to go and colonize? We probably should in the long term, yes. But is it what we should be doing now with the limited amount of resources and energy?
My opinion on that is, before you start thinking of moving, make sure your own fucking house is in order first.
Yeah. But just like when they say he's looking for volunteers of people to go there and to set up these long-term colonies. But when you look at the practicality of living on Mars, like when you're on about the rate, because it's got no magnetic field, it's got an incredibly thin atmosphere, so you were going to be massively affected. People are going to die. The people that are volunteering to go there, they're looking. Oh, it's a one-way trip. But it is a suicide. I'm telling you, you will die as a result of going there, and not by living through and going to old age. You will die probably a painful death in a short period of time.
Could just wipe you the fuck out.
Yeah.
And we're protected by our magnetic field. So without that, you can't even think about it. Our magnetic field helps us keep our atmosphere.
Yeah.
Like you can't. It doesn't even fucking churn, for lack of a better word, like the Earth does as well.
Yeah.
You're talking about having to change a lot of the actual planetary astro structure of how it sits in our solar system before you want to start talking about terraforming the fucking thing, like. Because you can't just create an atmosphere if there's no magnetic field, and there's no magnetic field because the iron core isn't.
Oh no, it's just that it's the reason it doesn't have a magnetic field is because Mars is really small, so if you got like
Does it have an iron core actually?
I think it does, but it's a solid core. That's the big difference. Like our magnetic field is generated by the fluid moving around.
So without that, you can't.
You're generating a current inside. Like it's the simple print. The same thing. You can use the same thing to explain how the microphone works.
Yeah.
You set up a current going of this material moving round and round, and an electric current generates a big magnetic field.
Yeah.
And that's what's sitting around in the Earth because the internal iron nickel core fluid is constantly churning. But Mars is just really small, so its core cooled and solidified and became solid billions of years ago. It might have had a small magnetic field early on, but it doesn't anymore. And you say, oh, why did that happen? Why is Earth so special? And it's literally just because it's smaller. Like you could sit in a secondary school lab and explain this, and just here we've got a small iron ball and a big iron ball, and we're going to heat them up and then measure to see which one cools faster. And the small one will cool faster because of the ratio. If you divide the surface area of the ball by its volume, how do you say it? The ratio is much smaller in terms of Earth. That it's got a very large volume compared to its surface area, where Mars has a relatively small volume compared to its surface area, and the rate of it heat loss is proportional to the surface area.
Yeah.
So the fact that even though it's a smaller surface, the ratio between that and the volume of
it is not enough.
It just means that it cools at a much faster rate than Earth does. Like that, Earth's one will eventually
Yeah.
lose all its heat, and
See,
solidify.
That's the thing. Like the only reason I would say, yeah, we should go to other planets is in the long run when we get to the stage where it's like, so, yeah, the sun's gonna kill us. We should move.
Yeah.
You know,
like we can look back now and say that this.
Is it true that the sun's probably gonna go before the Earth goes? As in before the Earth stops churning, the sun's probably gonna go first.
I'd have to work out the figures, but I'm pretty sure that the Earth would cool down before the sun.
Really?
I think so, but I'd have to work it out exactly.
Oh well, I suppose a lot of the stuff is relevant as well. Like we rotate in our axis, but we orbit the sun, and our orbiting of the sun is relevant to the sun's ability to generate force and gravitational field.
Well, that's just because of the amount of stuff that's there in it. Like, you know, eventually over the course of the next couple of billion years, it's just going to expand and expand as it burns up the fuel inside the middle. Like at the moment, the sun is sitting there, and it's in a stable state where you have all these nuclear reactions going on in the middle that is creating photons and pressure and pushing it out, while at the same time the fact that you've got all this stuff, it's trying to collapse down. Everything is trying to collapse down and become as small as it can, but the fact of it doing that is generating these nuclear reactions inside, which creates energy, which pushes it out, and you just have an equilibrium where the forces balance each other out. But eventually in the middle it's going to burn up all its hydrogen fuel and produce, like when it expands, when it starts, like at the moment it's burning hydrogen and turning it into helium. But eventually it'll run out of hydrogen and it'll start burning helium. And this is again nucleosynthesis of creating helium and then turning it into things like fluorine and carbon and all these more complicated ones. They actually produce more energy, and the pressure of it pulling it in will eventually force it out, burning those high energy ones. And that will push the whole thing out and go to a red giant. But then at the end, once it can't burn beyond iron.
Yeah.
And again, it's when you look at what's going on with the nuclear forces of going on in the iron atom. It can't burn beyond that. So eventually it produces all this iron and can't burn anymore. So this big massive red giant will just collapse down
itself.
Yeah.
It'd be really, really cool to be able to see, because the way our sun is, it won't go supernova. So
it'll go nova, which is just a small version of it.
It won't like have a massive. If our sun was to go supernova, most of the planets would be gone from our solar system. But the way it isn't, it'd be really cool to like be able to go in like the future and go into space and have a look at our solar system after the sun has done that, and like the remnants.
Well, we can do the next best thing now and just look around. Like there's billions and billions of experiments that are going on. There's billions and billions of experiments that are going on in the galaxy with all these stars, and we can look at. That's how we know about how stars evolve the way we do. That we can look at all these stars. Like we've only been looking at them and at this level for a couple of decades. But we can look and see all the different life stages of the stars all over the place, and then plot them up on these things, I think called a HR diagram, which once you learn how to read it, it is absolutely just amazing, and the amount of information and the paths that stars move on as they go through this. But we've never seen, we haven't been around long enough, like this is the human race. Yeah. The Earth hasn't been around long enough to see. And the sun hasn't gone through its life cycle, so how do we know what life cycle? Well, we can look at stars like the sun.
Was it the Big Bang was on a clock, and the start of the clock at 12 was the Big Bang. Humans are the last picoseconds before it hits 12 o'clock.
I can't remember the actual thing, but you're talking that you're down to fractions of seconds.
Yeah, it's like fucking ridiculous, like. But in regards to like leaving the planet and stuff, I always have this thing, and I've heard it a lot, like from different people, comedians or whatever. Of like, if you were to imagine kind of other species, and when we look at them, like, what can we find on planets like us? It's like these other species have purposely developed a club for their planets to be like, listen, lads, I have some bad news. Earth got people. No. No, are you serious?
Yeah, I think I've
has so much potential. It could have been the best of all of us. I know, but we have to stay away from it. Absolutely, we have to fucking, that cloak thing that your mom was talking about, we got to set that up and contact all the other systems and let them know, because we can't have these fucking things coming onto us. We can't get contaminated by them.
Yeah.
And it's hilarious. On a piece I saw 8 years and years ago by Joe Rogan, it's on the way to his concert, or his performance. It's him in the limo with like a monologue in the background and different shots and stuff. And he's like, if you were to imagine the Earth as a sandwich, And it's this beautiful, lovely piece of loaf, this beautiful bread with its contours and its lines, and you have the crust, and you have the white on top, and then maybe little pumpernickel seeds, and it's this beautiful piece of natural stuff. And then it gets mold. And you look at, you go on a plane and you look over the valleys of like LA, stuff like that, and some of them are gorgeous. But then you get to the main city of LA, and you see this brown crap sticking on top in these box-like angles and this smog, and it's mold on a fucking sandwich when you look at it like that. Like.
Yeah. Well, personally, again, and comedians are brilliant because they're the ones that play around and don't have rules in terms of the analogies they apply. That's why I love comedians dealing with things like religion, because frankly that you have to deal with these things through comedy and not
characterize.
Yeah, and not take them super serious. You should take them seriously in one aspect, but always be willing to come back and make fun of the things.
Yeah.
Like this, when you say that, if someone takes that too seriously, if humanity is a mole, we should be destroyed.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't deserve to live. But I do like this. I do have faith in humanity.
Oh, absolutely.
And that we should be able to come to a conclusion and figure out how to get along with each other on this little rock.
Yeah, it's something that like people, I don't know, maybe because of all the shit that happened to me, I had to have this outlook lest I be crippled with depression. But I really inherently believe that people are good. That for the most part, our natural design doesn't like us to be mean and evil.
Yeah.
And it's only our construct of consciousness and the unfortunate...
I'd say, when you say construct, I'd say that the metaphors we use to explain how we experience the world.
Yeah. And, the metaphors used to experience the world, all that stuff can become, as you said before, kind of tunnel vision kind of thing where we only think about that. And then there's also the disconnectance that alleviates responsibility. When you have a guy making a decision and the only thing he's thinking of is, I need this number to then be this number. Yeah, and then he tells other people down and down and down down the line, and then way down the line it means a load of people get fucking pulled out of their homes. But realistically, if the guy was told in front of these people, sign this paper and kick them out of their house, you'll find a bit more of a discourse to be immediately signing that piece of paper, you know what I mean? And usually it'll be, if it is what's going to make them do it, it'll be incentives like manipulation of you'll get fired or you'll get loads and loads of money and you'll be sorted for it. It's all these little incentives to fall into little loopholes and potholes we've created in our brain through conditioning and through what we see around us and what's taught to us.
Like for me, when you look at that goes, I think that comes from the philosophy of economics and the assumptions that they make of what's going on, like us being individual utility maximizers, that everyone is just out for their own benefit. What they do in that, I think, is that they turn everyone is told that they are their own little god and they are masters of their own world, and all these other people, they're in competition with all these other little gods in their little world. And that you have to work your way up to the top. And a guy who gets up to the top, someone who becomes a billionaire,
should be worshipped.
They are worshipped. It's got within Wall Street and all these, they've got the likes of Warren Buffett and all these people. And isn't he fantastic? Like for me, someone who becomes billionaireism is almost a mental illness. That you get this amount. It's like, how do you need that much stuff? Like here's something that we should address of how people when they take words, when we throw out words like millions and billions and all these things, like they're just words to people. When you treat them as words and billion and people using that kind of thing, like the fact that Ireland owes so many tens of billions, but how much is it? How much money? Or this guy's a billionaire. It's like, that I'd love to be a billionaire, the amount of stuff that I could do. But what are the consequences of us as a society generating billionaires? And that we try to have as many people with the most amount of money possible. But you don't need that. Once you get to a certain point, and again, we can relate it to the economy as a whole. Yeah. That we've grown to this level, and it's like now, okay, we've grown enough. We've getting to this stage has given us this perspective, and we need to start. We can't keep on going like this. We need to start doing something about it. But kind of how much like this? What's the difference between a millionaire and a billionaire? Do you know what's the difference between a million and a billion?
It's like 1,000 million.
1,000 million. Well, like what's that? Like we're just using words. For me,
Exactly.
For me, the best way to think about it, to understand the massive difference between them, is to compare it with time. Is the best thing. I'll just ask the question: how long? If you were to guess, how long is a million seconds? How long is that?
A million seconds, a couple of hours.
Couple of hours.
A few hours.
It's about 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Is a billion seconds.
Right, well,
or is a million seconds.
There you go. You've found out my biggest.
Yeah, but when you throw it at someone straight, and
terrible at basic maths.
And I was like that when you throw that at the first place and say, right, I want you to tell me exactly what I'm just going to say this. Tell me exactly what you think it is, and you're usually way off. So so a million seconds is 2 weeks. How long is a billion seconds?
Fuck off, really?
Just guess. If you think.
Okay, if a million seconds is 2 weeks,
instead of doing the maths in your head,
multiply that by 1,000. So it's 2,000 weeks, 365 days in a year.
Instead of working it out, I just wanted you to throw out, and I was hoping you.
Okay, a billion. I'm going to say about 3 years.
About 3 years. It's 32 years.
Holy shit!
So that's the difference between a millionaire and a billionaire. Is the difference between 2 weeks and 32 years. Like this. Like I'm a couple of years away from being. I'm not even a billion seconds old yet.
That's so much money.
It's just huge.
That's so much money. How did Mike Tyson blow 300 million?
And look at. And then when we count, when you count in this level of going from magnitudes, you go, okay, first it's a million, that's the first one, then it's a billion, then it's a trillion. Like this, America is trillions in debt. So how big?
What's the new one now? They're gonna have to use soon enough. Is it?
No, they have them all. There's quadrillion, quintillion, like it's just a naming system for all these. But when you take that, then what's a trillion? If a billion is 32 years, a trillion is 32,000 years. Yeah, which is what? It's like 7 times older than the whole history of human civilization.
Holy shit!
So that's the way I like to think of.
If you had a trillion euro, you would have more individual euros than you would have had fucking time.
I'm second. If you wanted to sit down and count, and just keep counting, it would take you 2 weeks to get to a million. It would take you 32 years to get to a billion, and it would take you 32,000 years to get to a trillion. Like they're huge. Once the money gets up to that kind of level, like it is farcical. And this is like, when you've got things like economic phenomena like hyperinflation, when money loses its value, and you see in Weimar Germany, where people were using
Japan, the yen, 1 million yens, like for a packet of crisps.
Oh, he was that like now. A friend of mine was in Korea, and he came back, and he has 10,000. I think they're won. I think is the unit of currency, but 10,000 notes. And I'd be just like, why don't you just? Like, it's just money. Just knock all the zeros off and deal with it. The small
decimal system. Just fucking knock it off. It's like I have to pay. Like it's like.
And the economists will come along with argument and say why exactly you can't do it within the economic framework of ideas. But what I'm talking about on the larger scale of what we are doing as a species to organize our societies, you're literally just sitting there playing with numbers.
Yeah.
That's all you're doing. And we need to move beyond that and stop just playing with numbers and start to solve problems.
There's like the only things like there's no quick fix.
No.
Mainly because a quick fix implies, not fixing the problem, just fixing the symptom. Like a quick fix in a car for broken axle is to repair the axle, but realistically, getting your fucking car, you're just prolonging the inevitability, But the way I think of it is like, if we were to start doing things like paramedics, actual like hard ass fucking doctors, not the doctors who haven't actually touched a patient in years and just sign things, and nurses, like, fuck me, nurses are, everyone knows, the backbone of the hospital. Like, personally,
my mother's a nurse, yeah. So
personally, me spending a lot of my life in hospital, the nurses are unbelievable fucking powerful entities in those buildings. Like. People who spend their life for no fucking reason, even though they know in their heads it's leading nowhere, to go to other countries and help fight the shit laws they have in their countries and help the people, build houses and all this shit. And they'll build those houses, and about 2 weeks after they go home, they'll be destroyed again, by the drug lords or the fucking warlords or whatever. But if we can start making them the celebrities, make them the people that we strive to be.
Instead of like sports stars or like here with Foo Fighters with Dave Grohl and all these.
A movie star.
Yeah.
Sorry, at least Dave Grohl's a terrible example because he's actually super fucking talented.
Yeah, but I bet if I sat down with here and we had this conversation with Dave Grohl, he'd probably, it was like, yeah, if I had like, you know, just enough to enjoy myself, I don't need to have all this money to keep getting more money, release new albums coming out. Like he's an artist who creates art because he enjoys it, because other people enjoy it. But I imagine anyway, like this, and I wouldn't know unless we got him to sit down here with us. But he was like, what I'm doing isn't worth what I'm getting for it. Like,
you know,
and just
a
look
lot
at
of his stuff, a lot of the phrases you hear him say, a lot of quotes from a lot of like I've seen interviews and stuff and like documentaries about the latest album he made that he made, Wasting Life. Humble is just the word. He's literally just like a lot of them. Like he did a band called Dan Cooker Vultures with him, Josh Holmes.
Oh yeah, they're fantastic.
From Led Zeppelin, not John Bonham,
Bon
Scott.
No, it's John Paul Jones.
John Paul Jones, thank you. And they didn't like massively. They did it because they just wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And when you stop giving that level of stature and like acting, Jesus Christ, you speak to any proper like Daniel Day-Lewis, anything like that, to a certain extent when they're not on camera, when you get down to brass tacks, their most thing is we're playing. It's lying. It's lying. Like we're doing fantasy make believe like you do when you're a kid. The only taxing thing about that job is the crazy hours and how you're away from your family if you have a family. You know, but for the most part, the work that you do compared to the payoff is minute. And especially one thing that grosses me out the most is the more money you get and the more famous you get, the more shit you get for free. Which is fucking retarded and breaks the system that if you were even going to go on that model, that breaks the system even more, you know? I think to do things like that, like have, you know, the people who like plunge themselves into fucking oceans to save people and shit like that, like firemen, fucking crazy shit. It's completely their own decision to do this. Like not policemen as in like the dickheads of power, but the actual people who want to be there to like would risk their life with a man with a gun to help a woman or another dude not be robbed or stuff like that, you know? Shit like that.
Yeah, but I don't again, like this, I don't like criticising the artists for doing all these things because they do create
lovely stuff.
and they should
I just don't think
but it can be done without the amount of money they put into it.
As you said, you doubt that if you were to talk to people, they really think that they genuinely deserve all this stuff, except for Kanye West, who is an example of a terrible human being.
And some of them like it goes crazy. Like this, money makes you crazy. It gives you mental disorders.
Yeah, of course,
I think.
It absolutely does. It screws you over.
Yeah.
Because like it's like the way I think of money in that sense is I am so fucking picky, except when I have a very fucking small choice. If I have a very limited choice, pretty much like most people, I think, you find it very easy to know exactly what you want. But when you have a massive choice, I literally stand there like this. Like I'm fucking disgraceful for clothes shopping. And I go on the internet and see exactly what I want, find it in the shop, and if I don't get it online, I go into the shop, buy it immediately and walk out. Because I'll stand there for fucking ages going, I don't know. I've no idea, and I will go crazy. Because I've no idea what we're doing. Now when you're talking about
can't decide, brain aneurysm.
Yeah, as simple as it's not even a case of do I have the money, it's a case of what do I like to wear. Now imagine your limit of what you want to wear is not limited by the amount of money you have.
Yeah.
And it's not just what you want to wear, it's what you want to do today, where you want to go, all these things. And you have this insurmountable amount of money. You will do stupid things like, you know, Tyson got a tiger and it cost him 35 grand a year. Sorry, 350 grand a year to feed the fucking thing. And that's the only explanation. That's the only thing you can do with that level of money.
You do the same thing like this. You hear news stories about people who win the lottery and then just literally go crazy and blow all the money, and then end up and say that it was a horrible thing to happen to me. Because when you're just given like that, like the money is like that, an ability to decide, and your ability to decide and choose things, the range of possibilities is limited by the amount of money you have. And you think, I'd be able to do all this and that if I only had more money. But then when you're given all the money to do it, suddenly there's so many possibilities that you can't decide, and you develop neuroses and just go and do this immediately. Like nothing is a barrier. Like reality starts to break down. Nothing becomes a barrier to what I want. I have money, so I can make you do what I want. Give me that, and I will give you this token of meaning.
Yeah.
In exchange, that'll let you get things.
This tangible piece of paper which represents digits on a computer, which doesn't actually represent what it's supposed to represent in the first place. Because originally it just represented, I have goals or I have things I want, but people are breaking into my house. Okay, what we'll do is, we'll come up with a system where we'll all just use this gold, right? And we'll put it in a building that we'll name, you have 5 pieces of gold, your name is Jim. You know, and you say the letters 2, 3, 4, or the numbers 2, 3, 4, and the person will go, Jim. And it means, and we'll put that building there, we'll have a few people with guns, and it'll be trusted, so when anyone else tries to rob that shit, you know, they can't rob that shit, and they're gonna go to prison, right? That's the original basic fucking concept of the idea.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned that with gold like this. I'm not one of these people that says, oh, if we only get rid of money, it'll solve all our problems. No, money is it's necessary, but for me that just because something is a necessity makes it, and in fact it probably makes it not a virtue.
Yeah.
If something is necessary means, okay, we have to use this and have to get along. Like this, like business people, they're a necessity and they perform important functions and do all this thing. But the fact they're a necessity means that it's not virtuous, that it's not something that you should worship for its sake. Something like art would be virtuous because it's beyond necessity. Once we get these basic things sorted out and the money and organising things, then we can go on and do these
greater
these greater things. But you have to solve what's going on at the bottom, and we have it's inverted, that money becomes an end in itself, and if we have more money like this, what's the problem?
That principle itself is literally described by the evolution of the species. When you start off, your entire being is your necessity to eat and to find shelter, to survive and to procreate. Then when you have shelter sorted, your food is like, I got food for a few weeks, and you know, you're sheltering about that, and like, I have actually, my wife's pregnant with a kid. What'll I do now? I'll start building things out of wood. Why not? You know?
But appreciate them as necessities rather than turning them into virtues and pushing them to the end. Like this, again, when we went on to like movie stars, another one is that of footballers. Like, I'm very angry at the institution of football like that. Anger probably isn't the word, but just kind of realise the consequences of us holding these guys up and the costs to society. Like this, you've got the likes of Messi and Ronaldo, and they are incredible. Like, to me they're artists as well. I can sit and appreciate for what they do, but think about, and they say, oh, they can only do that because they've been paid, because the payoff of all these millions that they get back. But think of all. And then children are told, what you want to be when you grow up? Oh, I want to be a footballer, so I want to be a footballer, so that's what I'm going to dedicate my life to, of trying to do this. For every Messi, you have, I don't know, thousands, tens of thousands of failed people, like even for much lower down, like we'll take any of the Irish players for the top. Think of all the people who this in their early teens, decide, I want to be a footballer, and I'm going to dedicate my life and practice to do all of these things and really push, because I want to be Messi, I want to be Cantona, I want to be Beckham, I want to be Ronaldo, I want to be Ibrahimovic, and thousands of guys who just never make it. But then you've gone from this, you know, massively important developmental stage of life, from your early teens to mid to late 20s, and that's what you've spent it done, and it didn't work.
Yeah.
Now what do you do?
What you do now? Yeah.
Now what do you do? And they end up on drugs and gambling. They're lying and it collapses.
Or they'll marry. I think one of the weirdest things that seems to not be understood as not a failure, but a loss of you've lost the ability to tap into your actual potential for happiness, and you and someone else, is when you do that kind of thing, and you do, like, you know, 10, 15 years of your life during your main 20s, late 30s, and you got nothing to show for it. And then you meet a person of the opposite sex in the same situation, and then you end up going together because it just seems to make sense, and you settle down and you have a kid, and it's just the rest of your life is just paying rent.
Yeah.
You know, to me that's worse than. I think Charlie Sheen has a better outlook on life than that. To be honest, it's like, it's my life. I'm happy with what I'm doing. I know it's probably going to kill me. But while you're sitting there going, oh my god, this guy, he just takes cocaine all the time and fucks hookers, Do you know how many people are sitting at home going, "Oh my god, that guy takes cocaine all the time and fucks hookers"?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But for me, you might say he's got a great outlook on life in terms of the practicalities of what he does. He should realise the implications. I mean, that I wouldn't partake in it at all.
Yeah.
But I know people do, and I'm perfectly comfortable. People do what they want, but you just have to say, do you realise of this? Like no more than the footballers dedicating your life to cocaine and hookers. That think of the lost opportunity. Like
Well,
this.
see, I don't think Charlie Sheen is like that, because that guy has made a fucking amazing living and done amazing shit all in his life, and then.
How much is it based on Daddy though?
Well, even still.
That's what he got the name. That's how he got the break in the start.
That's how he got the break. Yeah. But in regards to his own personal experience, not as to how he got there, he has been in amazing films. He has had amazing experiences. He's met amazing people. I even love the little things like in Hot Shots when he's going down in the Apocalypse Now scene, and then your man Martin Sheen's coming up in the boat, and they're both looking at each other. I loved you in Wall Street. You know, it's fucking brilliant. Michael Douglas, sorry.
Yeah.
It's fucking brilliant. He's led a really, really cool life, and he's enjoyed it. He's had happiness. He's had his pitfalls, his payoffs. He's experienced loads of different things. He's not a person who tried a certain format, failed, and ended up destroying his life with drugs. He's a person who lived his life, did awesome stuff, and now has a surplus of time that he can do whatever he wants with. And he chooses to just fucking have fun and get fucked up.
But like that, can he appreciate the philosophical and epistemological implications of quantum mechanics of the human experience? But like, you know, and he should, but
he doesn't necessarily have to though.
Yeah, he doesn't have to, but like that's where I think that myself and him would have a similar outlook on that of trying to enjoy it. But I just get it out of that rather than cocaine and hookers. But at the same time, I have other things like this. I'd be a bit of a musician, and I like to play guitar because I've invested the time in it, and I talk to other people loads of people pick it up in their early teens, and they get it, and it's usually to impress chicks. But once you impress your chick, and you get married and everything, you lose that incentive because that was your incentive. Yeah. For me, it never was. I wanted to learn to play guitar because I enjoyed it for its own sake.
That's like I haven't got to the stage, and I know that probably actually because of my incentive, I didn't realise there why I'm not as good as I should be considering how long I've been playing the guitar. Because I'll go for months without playing it. It all started. My reason for playing the guitar is one, I love guitar. I love music. I really, really love it, and it echoes a lot to me. And it's one of to me, music really, really. People go on religion. People go on different things. To me, the energy and the feeling I got from music really helped me a lot going through a lot of the shit. Like like if I wasn't tried to do a feat that like I could barely even lift my arm, if I put on the right tune, I can walk out of bed. You know.
Yeah. Oh, the power of music like this.
But if someone
music in general like that. I personally wouldn't use the word, but I understand what people mean when they describe it as spiritual and, you know, putting on particular music to control your mood. Like this exciting tunes for certain things. And
I wouldn't say it's spiritual. To me, I would probably say that we all have an undefined and unvisualizable different levels of, for lack of a better word, frequencies. And different things that we do and we interact with vibe better with our particular frequencies of different things. And some people take motivational speeches and long talks, and that hits their frequency perfectly. Some people get that frequency better off music or sound. And some people prefer to watch a movie. Even if it's a shit Hollywood movie, they'll get inspired by that, you know what I mean? And shit. But with the guitar, why I picked it up is because I wanted to have, when I was like 80 years old, to know that I've been playing the guitar for years. And to be 80 years old and still be able to go, you know? And in the hope that in the long run, because I'll always have the guitar as a part of my life, when I get to a stage where I'm not doing nothing because I am doing something, I'm waiting for stuff to happen, but I've done my stuff and I'm doing nothing now, retired at 65, 70, that I can start to, you know, spend time to learn really intricate solo of a song or a really beautiful song that I've always wanted to learn, because I've had a pedigree of 40 plus years where I always remembered where the strings were, you know, always remembered the frets. And to me, that was my entire reason for learning the guitar, and it's why still to this day, and only you saying that now has helped me realise why to this day I still cannot play a succession of chords without sometimes it not hitting the strings right. You know what I mean? And how after a stint of guitar, next time I have a string guitar to get my calluses back again. You know,
Yeah, like even
thought,
that, I've gone through periods that I would have picked it up in secondary school, and pushed to a certain level of that learning songs. I wanted to learn these Metallica songs and all these things, and I pushed out to a point and couldn't really get any further. And then I went to college and kind of dropped it down a bit. And then later on in college, I picked it up again. I said, right, I'm going to learn a bit of music theory now, and I'd forgotten most of the old stuff, but the actual like this. I don't think there's such a thing, but I'll use the word muscle memory of that, and the ability. I still had that, and became able to improvise more. Yeah. And I pushed that and would learn new songs and improvise over them, and then again let it drop down, let it drop down again. Lose the ability to remember these things like this. I used to be able to bash out "Sweet Child of Mine" now, but I've pretty much forgotten it now. But the fact that I'd gone and learned it means that I could go back and pick it up really quickly now.
Yeah.
Like I'm very aware of the different level of stages, what I was at during different periods of my life, and how that influenced why I was the way I was in terms of my personality, and like that. It's almost a measuring stick of life. That at that stage I was that good at guitar, and now I understand exactly why I was only that good. And then I dropped it, and then got to this stage. And now, like this, recently now, like this, since I finished college in the last 2 years, I've picked it up again and massively pushed. And you really do get the return at every stage. I've put in the effort and got the return out of it. Like more, you get so much more out of it than you put in.
It's really weird. Like anytime I've gone back to learn and I try to learn a song, I've never had to relearn how to play the guitar again. I'll always be able to go from that point onwards. The only thing that stops me is when I'll play the guitar, if not playing for a while, I'll have about 20 songs in my head. Then once I start thinking of a song to play, it'll go down to 5. And then I'll left with one song out of that 20 that I remember most of. And then as I'm playing, I'm like, fuck, what's the next chord?
Yeah.
Holy shit, I've no recollection what the next chord is.
For me, the most important thing to develop as you're going through, and I've only realised recently how much of I have compared to other people who I thought had the same ability, is that your ear training to sit down and listen to a song and be able to play it and be like, I know what's going, and I'm able to find this chord, and the next one I look around for it, and I've got it.
That's my problem. I don't play with stuff in the background. I usually just play by myself. Yeah, and so that's probably why I do, because actually that's a good point. I have like put on, what I noticed is that I'd like to do for a while is with deadmau5 songs. When I got into deadmau5, is I put deadmau5 on and start just licking my own little guitar pieces to it and stuff like that. And it's weird because if I'm sitting there in front of people, and like my mate Richie, he'll come into a room, he'll pick the guitar randomly and go and just sweat out this beautiful sensual lick completely off the top of his head. I can't fucking do that. I'll need to have something there that I can pick up with my ear and then tune. And even with my mom's guitar or whatever, all I need is an E. Once I get an E, I can tune the rest of the guitar by ear.
Yeah, but like that, I can tell when I was at that stage, and you're just developing along, and I can just say if you put the effort in, you'll get out and get to the level that your man is at, where he's able to just make it up as he goes along.
Yeah, it's ironic because I taught Richie how to play the guitar, and then at some point I stopped. And then he came back and the guy was able to fucking do slash solos. His belt, his strap broke, but he still was holding on his knee, playing away, and it's like, you motherfucker. And you're gonna take a quick break now for food. Because I'm fucking starving.
I'm dying for
Alright, we're back now, we have food and it's all delicious. Now I just want to ask, James, now how did you get into astrophysics and what made you decide I want to specifically be an astrophysicist, or did you inadvertently end up becoming an astrophysicist?
Well, it was after finishing secondary school, and you sit down, you go to the CAO, and you decide what are you going to do. I was always fascinated with sciences in general, so I picked a general science degree. I went in, and you do kind of a broad level at the start, where you do like geography and geology, and I did chemistry as well, and maths and physics. You do all that at the early stage. And then as you go on, and you decide to specialise. And I'd always had an interest in physics, but while I was in secondary school, I didn't actually do physics or higher level math. That I just read about it and found it fascinating. I did chemistry, but as I said, not physics. And then as I moved through the college education process, and then eventually had to pick down and saying, right, decide now which you want to do. I found all of them fascinating, like especially geography and geology, because like that it was just history and dealing with things like you're learning about dinosaurs and ancient earths and fossils and all these things, and then in geography understanding the way the world is now. But frankly, as I was going through, I found them really, really easy. I mean, what I remember, I think it was first year geology, I barely went to lectures at all, didn't go to the labs, and then went into the exams on the day, and just from my general knowledge of reading, ended up getting something like I think I got over 70%, and your labs counted for 20%, which I got zero in.
Everyone knows geography is a safety net.
Yeah, well no, this was geology.
Oh, specific. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I just found it easy and could have went on, and obviously that was in first year. It gets more difficult as you go on, but just as a whole, I didn't really find it challenging enough. And like, okay, I found physics challenging because I didn't do it in secondary school, but it was because it was challenging that I wanted to keep going through it. But the main thing that would have started it all was while I was in secondary school. I hang around with a friend who's now he did medicine and he's now a neuroscientist. But we would talk about quantum theory and relativity and physics and space and everything in general in school, and I would keep coming up. He was a couple of years older than me, and I keep coming up and asking him questions. And he just came into school one day and he said, "Here's this book. It'll answer your questions." And it was called The Elegant Universe by Brian Greene. He's another one out afterwards called Fabric of the Cosmos. It was really good. But that one specifically, and he gave this to, I don't know, what was it, like a 14-year-old, and I went home and read through it, and it was like this, a history of science, the development of all these things, and ended up like exploring string theory and all these kind of things.
Nice.
And it just blew my mind, and I was like,
string theory at 14.
I don't. Oh yeah, but I was reading it at this, like I would be reading Lord of the Rings, is the same thing. But this one, I was like, but this is science and physics, and it's all these mad concepts, and I didn't know how to accept them. It's like, is it okay to understand the world in these terms? So rather than answering my questions, it ended up filling my head with loads of questions. Especially the biggest one was that in terms of cosmology and the history of the evolution of the universe and Big Bang and coming up and these things. What's it called? The Friedman equation, which generates these curves, and there was like three solutions to the Friedman equation that give you a universe. When I read the book, it was that there are three possible ends of the universe. There was the big crunch, which is basically, it's like, imagine a balloon blowing up, reaching a maximum, crashing back down again, and maybe starting off, maybe another universe getting created. Or there was the heat death of the universe, like the big chill, where the universe would just keep expanding, and eventually to get to the stage where all energy would be evenly distributed throughout the entire universe, and you would just have a big nothingness. Like, there wouldn't be life, there wouldn't be anything at all. And then there was an intermediary one, which is where the universe, it blows up, expands, keeps going, and constantly slows down, but never stops expanding. The rate of expansion constantly slows and slows and slows. And I would sit there when I was 14 going, okay, there's three possible ends. Which one is the best ending to this big story of the universe? Three different ones. And I was like, well, for me personally, it'd probably be the big crunch, because then at least then, not we, but the universe gets a second chance. If we mess it up, we have a chance to go back again. That'd probably be the one I'd pick if I had to choose. And when would that be? So that would have been about like 2004 or so. And so I went up and always had that in my head when I was going through college. And then in my final year, we finally did a course in cosmology, and we were sitting there, and the lecturer explained how in 2008 that like this, we were bringing in things like, we'd learn about dark matter and then dark energy, and the idea that dark energy is accelerating the rate of expansion, so that it's not even slowing down anymore. It's actually, the rate of expansion depends on how big the universe is. As it gets bigger and bigger and bigger,
and it expands quicker.
Then it expands quicker and quicker. So,
which is bizarre as fuck.
Yeah. But it's dark energy. Like this negative gravity is the guy, and the guy who used the term, was it Rees in 1998 when he came up with this paper, and he has written down in his paper, he has negative gravity ? He's like this. I don't even know what this is. This is the only way I can describe it. And they've done observation that was in '98 where he came up with it theoretically, and then in 10 years later in 2008 they made observations that confirmed yes, it is the case. And I can remember sitting there in the cosmology class going, "Oh, thank you. This is why I came and did physics. This has justified me choosing physics and putting me through the stress of doing this crap hard subject without learning all these maths and putting myself under all this pressure and not enjoying myself the way other people were. Like, I was enjoying myself, but not in the way the other people that I knew were college who were doing like fucking philosophy and theology and all these other things. But it was just that you have answered my question. You've told me how the story, like the 3 different possibilities, 2 of them have been taken away. I was like, all right, I know how the universe is going to end. Now I can move on with my life."
What do you think about the idea of, well, not the idea, but the cool oddness, right? When you take into consideration that when you actually look at the brain and you put it in like computer simulation, and then you actually look at what we understand to be the more stable universe in our mathematical concepts, that we have a visualization, that they tend to be very, very similar in regards to our synapses and how everything is relevant, is really, really similar to galaxy clusters and superclusters and all these kind of things, right? Yeah. In the same way that bacteria, if it had a conscience, would think that it's its own little thing on a planet, and there's these other things around it that isn't seen as humans, there's these other forces of stuff that move around it, right? And then when you get out of that, it's a mouse. The bacteria and stuff that's in the stomach of the mouse is now it's a mouse, but that mouse in its own world is still just a little mouse, and it's all these other great universes around it, right? I like the idea that I like to think about just to think about it in general, that of the craziness of how insanely massive the universe is, how much we don't know, and how we really can only theorize, make ridiculously crazy concepts.
Oh, yeah, so the fact when we were talking earlier in the first half about everything being made up of atoms, and we talk about that, and all the stuff is that, we know now that like that we use things that, when we use terms like dark matter and dark energy, as I said before, matter and energy are 2 forms of the same thing. Yeah. Whatever it is. Yeah, smenergy. That the stuff that we understand in terms of atomic, they call it baryonic matter, which is the fancy name for things like neutrons and protons and all these things. They actually only make up, I can't remember the percentage now, but it's something like 10%, maybe less than 10%, and dark energy makes up 70% of the universe. The amount, if you take all the mass and energy, dark energy is 70%.
And it's the one we can't see and can't calculate.
And dark matter then is like 25%, and then the small fraction left over at the end is all the stuff, all the billions of galaxies, the billions upon billions of stars, is only this tiny fraction of what we can see. And the reason they call it dark matter, it's like, oh, dark matter.
That's because we can't see it.
Yeah, it doesn't.
We can observe its effects.
It doesn't interact with light. Light passes through in the way glass, like you can almost say that dark matter would be like glass, although it does interact with glass, but in the same way that you can see right through it.
Yeah.
That the light isn't affected at all as it goes through. So, and because all of our astrophysical observations are based on light, and you literally sit there with your machine and count photons, count how many are coming in, and then infer the nature of the star from the light and how that light is changing. When we're on about spectroscopy, even when we look at other planets and be able to tell what their atmospheres are, we're just looking how light has been affected by the matter there. We don't know how to look at dark matter. So we just call it dark matter.
When you take all the stuff into consideration, the idea because all theories are essentially kind of theories, and they kind of hold as much weight as the other until they're proven to be fact. I do like the possibility. I do like the idea of the theory that we could easily be sentient things inside a much more complex system that we're not aware of.
Oh yeah.
As in, we could be the little microbes on of E. coli in the stomach of something else.
The multiverse.
Yeah, well, no, the multiverse is meant to be that there's loads of individual universes. But I mean,
well,
the
system of all these other universes is this more complex, and we're just one tiny one.
One
but
tiny
then you get to
thing,
the problem of how do we interact with that? We're into the problem with dark matter. How do you interact? That's that's not even a theory. Frankly, a theory must be testable.
Yeah.
In that, you're sitting there and just speculating, and maybe it is, maybe it isn't. We might find an answer eventually. But as I say, when we get down to practicalities, that's fine as just a conversational talking point. But we've got much bigger problems to solve down here on our little rock.
Oh yeah, but
yeah.
For the sake of these kind of conversations and stuff like that, or even for the sake of when you're having a shit day and you're like, what's the fucking point of it all? It's cool to have those kind of things in the back of your mind that you've not come to conclusion, but you've hypothesized yourself to be like, hey, maybe that is the case. I don't have to fucking worry about this if that's the case, because it's silly,
Yeah.
And stuff like that. I think it's so magical not knowing things. And what's even more magical is knowing a small bit, but being able to concept and see a bit more of what you actually know. Because even I like the way with gravity, all we know is we observe the effects that gravity has. But it's not something we can sit there and go, see this is gravity.
Well, no, gravity is the curvature of space-time. When you sit down, it's so hard to think of it in terms of a three-dimensional system. If you imagine a clear cube where you're looking in there and saying this thing, this lump of gel or glass, whatever, is space-time, and I'm going to put in an Earth or a sun or a star in there, and the space-time distorts, and then when something moves around it ends up being in this path. It's really hard to conceptualize it. Just part of the human condition, part of human nature. It's really hard to conceptualize it at that level. But you can reduce it down by a dimension. Instead of thinking of it in three, you think of it in terms of two. The thing of you just imagine a trampoline and throw a bowling ball on top of it. The presence of the bowling ball dips, and then you get another a billiard ball and roll it across, and the path it moves is altered as a result. And we're sitting there, it creates these curves, and that when you in your mind sit outside the solar system and look at all these planets spinning around, they look like there's nothing there, but they're just spinning around. But what's happening is that the sun is there, and it has distorted space-time and created these curved paths, and it's ended up in this stable state where you've all these planetary systems. But we have no idea. We can call it's stable now at the moment, but we don't know. Planets could get fired off later on, or the whole thing might be in the long term unstable. That we're at a stable kind of state at the moment.
I suppose we can't really tell whether the rubber band is let to snap back. We could be in the middle of the stretch of the rubber band before it pulls back. We don't know.
Yeah, but again, thinking of these, you can't let these things trouble you too much.
No, they don't trouble me. I just find them fascinating.
Oh no, but anything, for people listen that. When you think about that, the sun is going to blow up at some stage, so there's no.
Yeah, we're fucked.
Yeah, so therefore, I'm not going to give to charity because we're all fucked in the end anyway. That's just.
But I think it's ridiculous to take that stuff, because if you want to have that personality, you can just think of, well, I could slip on a pavement tomorrow and die.
Yeah.
It's you might as well think like that if you're going to think in the grand scale. You just feel more justified in the grand scale because it's more inevitable.
Because it's outside of your control.
It's outside of your control, so you're okay to be afraid of it, whereas you don't want to admit that it could be outside of your control to slip on a pavement, but it can.
Yeah. But that's responsible. We have to realize, take collective responsibility as a species for ourselves, and make sure that we continue, because when you look back at the whole history of everything, it is just a series of coincidences and accidents. Even just the fact, when you look at the Earth and the Moon, we're sitting there. We have this enormous moon, in terms of the size of the planet. When you look at moons around Jupiter, some of them are the size of Mars. They're the size of planets within themselves.
Well, Jupiter has how many fucking moons?
Oh, I don't even know. It's 30s or 60, a ridiculous amount. But our particular Earth Moon system is an incredible cosmic accident, and life as we understand it, and us as humans, couldn't exist without this happening. So, and you can either choose to look at that as as a providential God intervening to create the systems necessary in order to create a species which then can worship him.
Like, I don't understand how he did what he did.
Or you just realize that there's so many billions and billions of little experiments going on that it just has to happen at some stage. Appreciate that we got here by this series of accidents.
Yeah.
And then realize, okay, we better take advantage of the fact that all these accidents are happening. Make sure that there isn't going to be another accident that wipes out the dinosaurs, or that we blow ourselves up.
It's I remember hearing that on it was a Stephen Hawking documentary, and he was talking about it was unfortunate for Catholics and people to see. I personally don't, although I'm not technically, I don't go to church or anything like that, but I do refuse to completely pull the idea of a level of force we can't understand that kind of binds us together in a sense, like the Force, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that kind of thing.
But frankly, like how you said that of Catholicism, all that is a story. Like the whole Christian thing is just a story to help us cope with the human condition and our experiences. Yeah. But frankly, like that, the likes of Star Wars is the same thing, and it's frankly a healthier one. Than the Bible.
Except when they made the fucking episode 1, the midichlorians. Fuck off! You don't need midichlorians. It's the Force, okay? It's shut up.
Yeah, it should be that abstracting. You don't need to explain it and those kind of things.
Especially if you're gonna use science, don't butcher it.
Yeah.
Just stay away from it. Like they had in the End of the World, or the 2012 movie with the movie 2012 about the apocalypse, the end of the world.
Yeah.
With John Cusack.
Yeah, I know. I just stayed away from all of that.
Their example, their scientific reason for this happening is there's a guy in the lab, and he's like, "Oh my god!" And the other guy goes, "What?" And he's like, "Come here!" And he looks in the microscope and he goes, "This can't be." And he turns to his friend and he goes, "The neutrinos are revolving." It's just like that. By the way, that's the word I was thinking of before. Those particles from the sun that help with the expansion of neutrinos, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, I knew it was right. The neutrinos are transforming. They didn't even say evolving; they said transforming.
Yeah.
And it's just like, no.
Yeah. No, they're.
And there's John Cusack running from lava.
Yeah. No, they're just produced as a byproduct of the nuclear reactions in the sun, and I don't even know what number to put in it. Quadrillions, like a second.
Astronomical number.
There's right now I'm sitting here and there are billions and billions of neutrinos flying through my thumb every second.
Yeah.
And they go through, but they don't. They just
Are quarks
matter.
smaller, by the way, the neutrinos? Are they at a lower level? Bottom quarks, down quarks. Are they all at the level?
Quarks are the makeup of of neutrons and protons.
Yeah.
So they're sitting in there. Neutrinos, I suppose they're on the same scale, but like when you're dealing with those tiny things like size, they're just it's all it's all high energy physics stuff. We did like that fascinating course, and that'd be more like going on the Higgs boson kind of thing and investigating the fundamental forces. What have we got? Gravity, electromagnetism, and then the strong and the weak nuclear forces, and they're the ones that we don't experience at all. They only operate on the level of holding atoms together. They're like the glue. With the strong force is like the glue that holds it all together, and then the weak force is what is it? It's to do with nuclear decay and all of these things. And when we go back, the ratio of the strengths between all these different forces, we can take observations and look back. Because as well, that when you make these observations and when they're on about looking back towards the Big Bang, they're literally seeing the unit, like looking back in time.
Yeah.
And seeing how different it was. And there's a limit to where we can go back. There's like almost a haze and a fog as we look back where we can't see anymore. What's the word? Okay. Can't remember the word. It's the decoupling phase where the universe was opaque.
Yeah.
And you couldn't see through it because light was bouncing around off all the things.
It's like it was just after the singularity. It's the point just after the singularity, isn't it?
Afterwards, yeah, but it lasted when was it, about 320,000 years
before things started.
And then the universe gets big enough where you're able to get hydrogen atoms forming as opposed to this soup of protons and electrons and photons and all of this. So we like this. All our astrophysical observations are based on studying photons, whether they be radio waves or gamma waves, studying light. There is some neutrino astronomy and all this kind of stuff going on like that, trying to do dark matter detection. But once you get back to that stage, the observations don't work anymore, and that's what's going on in the likes of in CERN with these super colliders. They are recreating the conditions in terms of the energy densities and what's going on. They're recreating those conditions in the lab to see what it was like, and then we can infer what the conditions were like, and we're pushing it back to literally fractions of a second after the Big Bang. But there's always more and more and more stuff going on like this. It's fascinating. We're about to enter like a new era of physics
understanding.
Yeah.
Three final quick questions. One, do you think, or under your understanding, the Hadron Collider, if that wasn't done, or if the fact that it is built, how do you think it's helped us really shorten the time gap between we were able to test the shit we had before to see if that works, and then go to a much different level of being able to test in such a small amount of time? Or do you think without the Hadron Collider we would have got to that anyway, or has that exponentially changed the game?
Oh no, the Hadron Collider has. It's opened up a new realm, created new physics. Like we were there's plenty of other of these colliders. Like it's been going on now for decades and decades of investigating these high energy collisions. But you measure them in terms of like that they're atom smashers. They're smashing atoms together and creating certain levels of energy. And the amount of energy, the realm of physics that you're operating in depends on the amount of energy involved in the collisions. So by colliding them, by speeding them up and making them go faster, by building a bigger machine, you're able to unlock more energy levels and see how these fundamental forces and these fundamental particles operate and interact with each other. But then you can only find out so much with that, and it's like, okay, I think we found out enough of this one. If we want to see, and we can come up with these theories and test and see what happens at a higher energy state. But we need a new super collider to operate at those higher energies, and that's what the Hadron Collider has done. It's opened up this new field, and I imagine they're already planning bigger ones and everything.
It goes over how many fucking hundreds of miles does it cover, like?
Oh, I think it's 20 kilometers in diameter. I think it's that.
So like overall, I don't know. I'm not good with pi and stuff like that. But turning a circle and then turning that into a straight line, and in regards to the distance covered.
No, you just multiply by 3, so it's about 60 70 kilometers.
Fuck.
Long. And they speed around and they spin it round and round and round.
I know I said 100, but that was ridiculous. That alone is a lot of fucking...
Oh yeah, and they'll take two beams. Imagine like a thin, really big donut that's 60 kilometers long, and you can take two beams of protons, so that you're flying around the likes of little billiard balls, spinning round and round and round and round, and you get them up to a high speed, and then you cross the streams like in Ghostbusters speed. One crosses over with the other, and just bang. And you want it to happen here. Like most of it is just a tube, and then every so often there'll be like a big, massive detector around here, and you just get the streams to cross at that detector and create this massive interaction. You've got quarks and all these other, what would they be, kaons, like this. They literally call it the particle zoo. There's so many different types.
I saw the table in one of the Brian Cox's lectures. It's like that fucking big of just
all
these fucking things.
And they're just trying to organize, like even that, like this. I love telling the story. Like why quarks? Why the quarks? It's such a weird word to use.
Is that quirky?
Huh?
Is it because they're quirky?
No, it was because the guy who came up with the form, like they were discovering all these new particles and all this new stuff going on back in, when it would be, the 40s and 50s. They were sending up balloons with detectors in them up in the sky, because they couldn't create the massive energy, but what's going on in the super collider is going on in the sun all the time, and it's creating the same things.
Yeah.
So they'd send balloons up into the high atmosphere, detect these particles, and then come it down and then look and see. It's like, oh, we've detected all these kind of things. And all these new things were coming out, and they couldn't really explain them. And then the guy, Murray Gell-Mann is his name. What a name. He's the guy that came up with a kind of mathematical formalization to explain why they have the structure they do and why they occur the way they do. And the thing is, what is it? The one around about that protons and neutrons. Each one of those is made up of three 3 quarks and a certain combination of different types. And he'd figure out that, okay, there's these things, and I know that protons and neutrons are made up of 3 of them. So what am I going to call them? And at the time, he was reading James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake. And there was a line in Finnegan's Wake where he goes, 3 quarks for Mr. Mark. And like that, Joyce was just writing in like a Dublin accent.
Yeah.
So it was 3 quarts for Mr. Mark. But he was writing it as a Dubliner speaking it, 3 quarks. And Murray Gelman, I think he's American, he might have been Scottish, but he just read that, thought it was funny, and he said, oh yeah, well, 3 there.
Are you serious? It's named after something from a James Joyce fucking book of Dubliners talking.
Oh yeah.
That's fucking amazing.
Like when we say quarks, and we pronounce them quarks now, but the actual, in terms of the Joycean pronunciation, would be quarks.
Quarks.
What
was it referred to? Like a quart?
Like a quart. I think it's like asking for a pint or something.
Yeah, a quart was a quark. Yeah. That's fucking awesome. That's like another fucking Stapleton for like Ireland.
Yeah, and just to show like this, how things apply, like what. There was another, I can't remember his name, but there was another physicist at the time who was essentially come up with the same thing, like this formalization. Like I think these mathematical laws exist outside of us discovering them, because there was a guy who at the same time was trying to solve the same problem and came up with the same formalization, but these units of 3 that make up the protons and quarks, he said, right, I need to come up with a name, and he called them aces. And just as a pure accident of which one do we pick, we have to pick one of them, we went with quarks and not with aces.
That's mad. I'd say the word like aces already, people are going to be too confused if you try explaining to people using a word that already has the.
Well, I don't even know that. I just much prefer the idea of quark because it's nice and quirky.
It is, yeah, quirky, yeah.
Like that, he'd probably come up with aces because frankly he was probably a poker player.
My second question is probably a big question, but if or when we actually find a way to detect and actually, this is dark matter, and understand it, what kind of meaning will that have for our understanding of the universe and how the human race, like what kind of doors will that open if we were to understand it, or do we not know enough to even know the kind of doors that could be opened?
Yeah, well, the question we were asking, once we found it's there, the next question is why is it there? And it must have some kind of implication for the whole, like this, the thing about that dark matter, that it doesn't interact with light, which is why we can't see it. But it does have, but it does have a gravitational effect.
That's right, yeah.
It's just that, like this, when you look at, you see pictures of the Milky Way with this beautiful structure of going around, this spiral going around. And this is one of the things that they proved that it was there. They tried to, when was it? I think it was in the 80s. They tried to generate mathematical models of this galactic structure in computers, like to evolve. They wanted to evolve it within the computer program, within this model, to try and generate, to see how the galaxy evolved. And so what they did all the observations, added up the amount of stuff they could see, and put it into the model, and it just didn't work. When they ran the simulation, yeah. It just fell apart. It wouldn't be stable, and then they said, right, well, if we introduce, how do we make it stable? Well, if we assume that all this stuff is there, and that's what, like, the whole galaxy, when you see the galaxy sitting there, as a spinning, a disk, there's a massive halo, like a tree, like the whole way around it, of dark matter, that is having a gravitational effect on the other the matter that we can see, visible matter,
keeping it in
that lets it have the structure it does.
Nice.
So when you look at the Milky Way, it wouldn't look like that if all this dark matter wasn't there. Like it's not just nothing.
So it's not just gravity that keeps it to that formation.
Oh no, but it is gravity, but it's the gravitational effect of stuff that we can't see.
Oh, that's fucking cool.
Yeah, so this to understand the evolution of the whole universe, we have to come to some kind of understanding of what is dark matter. I remember that some student was asked that. It was in an ad, and I was just like, you pretentious little twat. but it's a massive question.
The final question is just really stupid, just for my own self. It's actually two-parted, depending on the first answer. Does every single, or for what can we see, astral body go around a stellar object in an elliptical orbit? They're always elliptical. There is no circulatory orbit.
I wouldn't say there'd be none, but what they'd say, that this is Kepler's laws, and that he realized like it was the ancient Greeks and all this, and Aristotle and all of those, because the circle is so mathematically and aesthetically pleasing as this perfect shape.
Yeah.
That's why they come up, when the Greeks talked about that, about the spheres, the different sphere, every planet operates on its own sphere. It was because mathematically the circle was so perfect.
Yeah.
Like we use the phrase a perfect circle.
Yeah.
That's related through pi. But then when was it, in the 1500s, I think, Kepler realized that that's a special case of an ellipse is just a circle that's squished a bit, and an ellipse can change and can take all these different kind of shapes. So there might be a circle, but I imagine the circle would be unstable, and that it would have, no matter what, you end up in some kind of elliptical thing. But when we say ellipse, and you imagine ellipse as, I don't know, if people listen, well, that'd be a symmetrical egg shape. That's how we imagine it. But the planets, when you look at them, they'd only be very slight ellipses, like small deviations from the circle, like only squish the circle very, very slightly.
And then that brings me to my next question. If that being the case, if everything left to its own accord of nature, especially in space, tends to just follow this spherical pattern, that everything left to its own accord clumps into a sphere, how come it defies the model and is slightly elliptical? Like, what is it that makes it so it actually can't be, even though everything else finds perfectness in being this formed circle or sphere, how come that thing in itself will break if it's a solid circle? It has to be some kind of flattening thing to make it slightly elliptical.
Yeah, it's just
the way it is.
You're just never going up, like the circle.
You're never going to know. Don't ask the question.
Circles are mathematical. If I sit here and draw a circle, it's not going to be like, circles are mathematical abstractions.
Yeah.
That they don't, like this one we were saying about. I said that infinity. Mm-hmm. Infinity doesn't exist any more than a circle, or even a straight line. If you draw a straight line, but when you zoom it, there's all this changes and tiny deviations. Like, that's just the nature of reality. You're not going to have ultimate perfection, because perfection is something that you have to define, and that's, like, again, going back to Christian theology and Christian philosophy. Perfectness was God. But you can't assume it's real because you've invented it's perfect. The real world isn't perfect, but it was just something to put outside it.
Yeah, because if something's perfect, everything they do in design is perfect. If you're infallible, you cannot create something that has infallibility. Does that make sense? That in regards to, like, the belief of, if you have a God and you think you believe the God is completely infallible, then the idea that human beings exist and can be pricks defies that logic. Because something that is infallible couldn't make that kind of a fallible mistake.
Yeah, well, you're getting it. That's the debates that theologians have and all this. Like, my big one was that about the trying to put omnipotence with that all knowing, all powerful, and all good. You can't have your cake and eat it. You can't be all three like that. You're dealing with the problem of evil in the world. Really interesting guy to look up, actually, that discusses that. Is a fellow named Bart Ehrman. He was raised as like a fundamentalist, born again Christian in America, and went off and was like myself with physics, went off and studied, and he learned all these ancient languages and seen all these documents and everything. And then I don't know when, I can't remember when he said it was, but at some stage he'd learned so much about it. He said, "Well, I can't believe it now." And he's like, he's got plenty of things on YouTube where he sits down and debates it. And his particular thing was that of the same as mine. He said the idea of the problem of evil of the world. I can't equate the Christian God with the stuff that's going on in the world. When you see things like, how can you say God has a plan when things like tsunamis happen, when humans create atomic bombs and all these things, or even like this, the likes of Hitler and all these people. Like, that's the scariest thing about these horrible things that happen in history with the likes of Hitler and Stalin and people, is they were convinced that they were the good guys. Absolutely convinced that they were saving the world.
Yeah. And
the same with that, and even going back into medieval times and everything, like the Crusades, one of the most horrific periods in human history.
Accept Christ as your savior, will kill you and your family.
Yeah, the Pope went and said the phrase he used when he announced the crusade was Deus lu vult, which means God wills it. God wills that you go and do this. And he said, and he gave the Crusaders a blank check. He said, if you do this and you go and take back the Holy Land, I'm telling you as God's representative,
you'll be absolved
that you will be absolved of all your sins. And they went out there and they ate babies, and massacred and slaughtered people
because they were given the okay.
Yeah. Once you're given a moral blank check, all your sins that you have committed or will commit are forgiven if you go and do this. And then once you give people that, as I said, moral blank check, then
everything's fair game.
There's no limit in morality.
That's like I had to, in order for myself to grow as a person. I realised that because I tried to go on my own moral code, and I realised that I don't have one. My moral code is based on the opinions of the people I care about, and I can envision in myself before I make an action or do something, a poignant thing. I envision, maybe I tried it at first, but it's now natural. A really close friend of mine or something like that, and because I know them so well, I can get a pretty good hypothesis on their reaction. And if their reaction makes me go, shit, I can't do it.
Yeah.
Whether I think I can do it, whether I know myself, I can do it and not give a fuck about it. And honestly not give a fuck. And I don't have to justify myself to everyone else, because people try to justify too much shit and try to give proper meaning and reason. But for the most part, it can convolute your way in life as well. But realistically speaking, if you're completely free of moral code, you're a sociopath. And I think because it's so easy to lie to yourself, and it's so easy to construct a sense of reason for what you're doing, or justification for what you're doing, it's very easy to corrupt your own moral code. So that's why because I knew, I didn't do it because of that, I did it because I felt like I didn't have a moral code. But then it kind of, as I got older, it goes, oh, that actually stands to reason, because even if I did, I could corrupt it, because I can lie to myself. So the fact that I base my moral code on the people I care about's opinion of me, that's kept me on a truer path than I've ever been on in my life.
Yeah.
You know? And I think that's it's a very scary thing when you say to people, here's a sword and I absolve you of your sins, go kill.
Yeah.
It's crazy, like.
Yeah. No, mine is just basically just don't be an asshole, and then find out like that.
Yes.
Don't be an asshole. I wail on Christianity in this and an awful lot, but like it's right there, and people say, oh, live like Jesus and do this. Jesus' philosophy was basically don't be an asshole. With the golden rule, treat others as you would have them treat you. But you need to sit down and say, okay, Mr. Jesus, why should I do that? And he turns around and says, well, because if you don't, you're going to face an eternity of torment in hell. And I was like, well, I think I might be able to come up with a better reason than that. Maybe because the other person is a person like me, and I would like to be treated like that, is a bit of a better reason than fear of eternal torment. I
think as well, the fear of eternal torment, I don't think it's eternal torment as in you go to this place and it's fire and you're in torment. I think that in that mindset, when you're depressed, time has no meaning. When you're really depressed, time has absolutely no meaning. And if you live a life where you haven't empathized or had these natural things that are a part of being a human, you haven't addressed them, there's this emptiness and this lack of tangibility to the things and the payoffs and the decisions and stuff you do. And I think in alone itself is why people like that are so fucking insecure and shit like that, even though they're supposed to extreme like bravado or feminine prowess and whatever, they're fucking insecure because they've never ever really experienced or the proper fundamentals of what life can offer you, because they have chosen to just abstract themselves from all those kind of things in order to gain what they thought was the important stuff. And at the end of the day, it can be sensed as a life of torment, because usually 99% of the time when these fuckers on their dying bed, they usually go, I fucking should have called my family. I should have not been a cunt to so many people. Fuck, and now I have to die like this. You know, to me that is, in different abstracted words, almost the same as eternity or torment. You know what I mean?
To me, the horrible thing is that kind of thing, when you end up with someone being in the deathbed, but someone who is trapped in massive depression will end up in a stage and end up and take their own life as a result. Like, you know, what have I done with my life up to this point? There is no point of it at all, and I've hurt all these people. I'm better off dead, and all these people end up better off dead. I mean, it's one thing coming to it on your deathbed, but it's another thing coming to the conclusion when you're in your mid-20s, like, or even earlier, like this, like now, like teenage suicide, and like people our age now, it's the most common cause of death in this country.
I think, which is I find strange because this time of life, I find less of a reason to kill yourself than a few years before. Where it was like, we have a model and you have to reach this, and if you don't, you fail. Because right now in a stage of, we don't know what the model is, we have no idea what the fuck we're doing. I'm just going to go and spend time with my family and be happy for a while.
Yeah.
To me, that actually really helped. That helped me a lot. So I was like, thank God, I'm not actually joining a rat race. I realised that the rat race is over and people are now going back to their day-to-day lives. Now I can go along in the sea of things. So it all balances out in the end. But this has been a super fucking interesting podcast. And it's probably been the most credible podcast I've had. Because I haven't got someone of that kind of stature of knowledge to lay it fucking down.
Yeah, well, see, this don't take as that like this. Whatever I say, everything that I've said now is on a caveat, as in. But I actually need to look up and make sure exactly.
Yeah,
okay.
Like that's like personally myself as well. I say a lot of stuff, and I should say more on the podcast that I'm a fucking moron, and all I know is other shit smart people have learned that I've tried to remember, and that's about it. But it's nice to have someone who's actually put themselves through their life to actually know a bit more of the actual basics of it, rather than understanding the theories and what we know now.
Just reading it like that, I was never happy just reading it in a popular science thing. That's why I did physics, is because I could do that, and I find it fascinating and everything. But to push that and to find out exactly, is it okay to understand this and explain this to other people? Am I sure in what I know about these things?
It's also refreshing to have that kind of conversation with someone who also, like with yourself, who will be able to, like a few times I said things, you're like, I don't really like using that word and stuff like that. It's nice to have that, and it's also nice to not to know that I'm not the smartest person in the room. But there's a lot of times I can't have this fucking conversation with a lot of other people because they would not even be fucking arse thinking about stuff like that at all whatsoever. So it's nice to actually get someone who knows more about it to like. A person astrophysicist basically. So it's cool.
But, perfect evidence, as we started off with that, what Richard Feynman said. He said if you can't explain it to a 10-year-old or any other person, if you can't explain it, you don't understand it. So the only way you can test your understanding is to try and explain it and be pretty confident that you got your point across.
Do you think that probably is subconsciously why you probably might want to be a teacher? The end game.
That'd be the selfish aspect of it.
The selfish aspect
of that. I'm doing it because I want to make sure that I understand it.
That's fucking cool. Do you have any like Twitter fucking anything at all that anyone can get anything from you or whatever like that?
No, I've kind of stayed away. I've only recently gone on the Facebook now. I stayed away from it for ages because I've seen other people being swallowed up by it. So, but no. Maybe eventually this. I'm trying to do a bit of writing myself and a mate are trying to put a book together now. It's a long-term project and everything. But so I might have to get into it eventually. But I'll only get into it when I absolutely have to.
And I find thing I just thought of now. The guy in your picture, is that the Welsh rugby player?
And on the Facebook?
Yeah.
No, it's Zach De La Rocca.
That's Zach De La Rocca?
The Rage Against the Machine, yeah.
It does not. That doesn't look like Zach De La Rocca. How fucking old is that, man?
I just went. I have no idea. It would be from the early stages, probably like that.
Because I'm a fucking huge Rage Against the Machine fan, and I didn't see him in that photo at all.
Yeah, big afro on.
Yeah, I never seen him with the afro, and the only thing I thought of because he's wearing a red T-shirt. Is have you seen the Welsh player with the big afro?
Yeah.
Fucking huge barbarian, like that's what I thought it was. First of all, I said, "Oh, is that James?" And he was like, "No, that's not him." I was like, "I thought so because it looks like the Welsh rugby player." And he's like, "No, nothing like that."
Yeah. No, that's
Zach De La Rocca.
In terms of grading your political philosophy and outlook, you can't beat a bit of rage.
Oh, you really can't, man! What a band. Anyway, it's been a fucking fantastic interview. From me, Dan, and from James McNamara. Thank you to everyone for listening. Tweet, like it, subscribe, share it to your friends. Even if you think this is a piece of shit, tell your friends about it. Because it gets my name out there.
Yeah, just spread the word like that. We're never going to understand or solve any of these without talking about them. So. And
hopefully I'll get, maybe in the future, I'll have James in for another podcast. And there's another person I think you know, Steve. Do you know Steve? Dave's mate, Stephen? Or do you know from different kind of...
I think that could be my neuroscientist friend, is it?
Oh, neuroscientist / lifeguard.
All right, no,
paramedic.
they're two different people. That's my cousin Connell, who's the lifeguard, and my friend Steve, who I'm actually crashing with now while I'm up in Dublin.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Maybe like this, I might. It'll take a bit of convincing, but we might do it.
Yeah, I would like to get just more fucking thinkers and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, so thank you everyone for listening, and we hope you enjoyed. This has been the Free Bant Express. I am Dan, and you are
James McNamara.
awesome. Take it easy, everybody. Bye bye. Peace and love, and hug a person just for the sake of it. Awesome. Peace out.